Welcome to the Select Board meeting for January 9th, 2024. Welcome, everybody. Please join the board with a pledge to the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Canty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which are acts which modify the open meeting law passed by the state legislature, this meeting will be taking place in a hybrid format. We will have a member joining us over the Zoom webinar platform. We will have other members joining us in person at Town Hall here at the Great Hall. Members of the public who wish to observe this meeting or attend it may do so by watching it on television. They may do so by coming to the Great Hall here at Town Hall, or they may do so by joining the Zoom webinar, which is included on the agenda that is posted on the town website. This is a meeting that will start in open session and then go into executive session. We have two items on our agenda for executive session. We have, first and foremost, the Select Board will hold an executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Clause 9, to meet or confer with a mediator as defined in Section 23C of Chapter 233 with respect to any litigation or decision on any public business within its jurisdiction involving another party, group, or entity, provided that any decision to participate in mediation shall be made in an open session, and the parties' issues involved and purpose of the mediation shall be disclosed, and no action shall be taken by any public body with respect to those issues which are the subject of mediation without deliberation and approval for such action at an open session. This is in regards to Northern Construction. We also have a separate executive session item. The Select Board will hold an executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Clause 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. This is in relation to American Cruise Lines, specifically a lease. I would make a motion, Mr. Chair, that we enter into executive session for these two topics.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Blutzer. Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Blutzer?
Yes.
And myself, yes. And is Mr. Helm on Zoom?
I don't believe he is at present.
Okay, so maybe when we come back. So we're going to go up and do our executive session, and then we'll be returning.
At approximately 6 p.m.
Yes. Thank you. See you later. All right. We're going to go on to licenses and administrative notes. The board's wishes. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions. Unless any of my colleagues do, I would make a motion to approve administrative notes 1, 2, 4, and 5. Or do you want to do the licenses first?
It doesn't matter to me. If no one objects, I'll take them all.
I'll do administrative notes 1, 2, 4, and 5, and the 4 licenses, or 3 licenses and 1 surrender of a license, all as one group.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Mahoney. Discussion? Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blutzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Unanimous on all of them. Moving on to the agenda items, we have introduction to the HHS Department and opioid settlement dispersal. Mrs. Brady? Dispersal, excuse me.
Can everyone hear me? Excellent. So good evening. It is my distinct honor to to stand before you and introduce myself as the first appointed Commissioner of Health and Human Services for the town of Plymouth. I want to thank the Select Board for your time and allowing us to present a snapshot of the Health and Human Services Department, and thank you to Town Manager Derek Brindisi for having the vision to bring HHS to the great town of Plymouth. It is my privilege to introduce the incredible HHS team. Dr. Emily Wilson is the Assistant Commissioner of Health and Human Services. Emily. Mr. Jay Gardner, Plymouth HHS Consultant and former HHS Commissioner of Worcester. Kelsey Casey, Library Director. Karen Keene, Director of Health. Ann Slusser, Director of Recreation. And Roxanne Whitbeck, Veterans Director. An amazing team. So, let me get my clicker. Yep, there we go. What is HHS? Our amazing jetty exemplifies who we are. Thank you to the talented photographer Denise McAferry for allowing us to use her beautiful photograph. Simply put, consider us the bridge to resources in our hometown. Some communities have the misfortune of not having enough resources for residents. Not true in Plymouth. We have an abundance of resources, incredible expert resources to meet the varied needs of our residents. But who connects residents to resources and vice versa? Well, consider HHS the golden needle and thread that does just that. We have for you a mission statement. Our mission statement, building bridges to community well-being, the mission of the Plymouth Health and Human Services Department is to connect people with vital resources within the framework of a healthy, humanistic, sustainable, and resilient community. Our goal is to foster a comprehensive and compassionate social health support system that promotes a culture of belonging and cohesiveness for residents and visitors alike. The 5 divisions have been meeting weekly since the summer to operate as a cohesive department. This team together created this mission statement, and it exemplifies our core values. We're building a dynamic department that engages and educates our community, and one of our initial core goals is to ensure a comprehensive health needs assessment is completed, specific to the community of Plymouth. We have a vision as well. We are very crafty like that. So, our vision. We envision a systematic approach to ensuring health equity for all with a commitment to excellence, community engagement, supportive partnerships, collaboration, and innovation within America's hometown. Our tagline, health, equity, leadership, and partnership. Help. That's what we exemplify. Health equity means that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain their highest level of health. Think of HHS as community leaders who, in partnership with expert resources, will immunize our community with good information for them to make good health decisions. See what I just did there? Immunize our community. Just want to see if you're paying attention. Emily will now talk about what specifically defines health.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for having us. So we wanted to talk next about Plymouth HHS and our theory of change. And first we wanted to start with what actually shapes health. What is our theory of change around health? So when we think about health and we ask this question, most of us think about things like genetics, family health history, illnesses, and our own health behaviors. Did I eat a healthy breakfast? Did I go for that walk at lunch? And these are important factors to be sure. They affect our health outcomes on the individual level, especially on the individual level. And on the community level, however, we know, and research tells us, that the largest drivers of health outcomes are actually related to our social conditions and access to resources. And if you see up on the graphic that we've provided for you on the left, how this sort of breaks down. So as I said, we know from the research that these drivers, known as the social determinants of health, things like the ecology and the environment where we live, our access to medical care, These actually can account for up to 75% of the health outcomes that we see on the community level. So when we think about that and we think about what shapes health, within HHS, we're all about understanding what shapes the health of our community and how are we going to achieve health equity, as Michelle mentioned. Well, our scope, what we actually do in our day-to-day as a department, is that we address the social determinants of health. These are the non-medical factors that influence health and the conditions in which we all live, work, and play. Although HHS does not provide direct services, we can make sustainable, healthy change in Plymouth by partnering with local resources and serving as the backbone organization to connect people and service providers. As Michelle said, simply put, we are the bridge to resources for residents and partners. So again, we offer this theory of change, and now specifically looking towards health equity. And if you see it on the left, the graphic shows us what these social determinants of health actually are. What are the buckets? What are the breakdowns? Well, there are 5 distinct categories that we can look at that, again, from the research we know, directly impact the largest proportion of our health on the community or population level. And these categories are access to health care, access to healthy neighborhoods and built environment, social and community context that is strong and provides inclusive opportunities for people to gather and be part of their community, opportunities for economic stability, and opportunities for education access and access to high-quality education. And so what will we do to bring about some of the changes that we've been talking about? What will we do? Well, when we use this lens of social determinants of health to achieve health equity, this theory of change comes into clear focus. It's rooted in the science of innovation, implementation, and improvement. By engaging our community members and leveraging resources, including deep ties and relationships in the community, we will have the innovation to move forward and improve the quality of life and health in Plymouth. By convening our partners and assessing our own health needs, we will be able to implement initiatives and move forward. And by using data that we've assessed and synthesized ourselves from within our own community and putting this into actionable plans, we will be able to make data-driven and evidence-based decisions and, again, improve the quality of life and health in Plymouth. Thank you. Now we're going to hear from Michelle again on the Commissioner Spotlight.
Thanks, Emily. And Jay and I are going to share a brief overview of basically the first HHS project, which is the Opioid Remediation Project. And Jay is going to give you, this is my little spotlight, a little background on some of that. Jay?
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. As you can now understand, the 5 divisions remain intact with their unique responsibilities. However, collectively, they come together to partner with community partners and service providers to handle those deep, complex societal issues. You can imagine what they are. Mental health, homelessness, food insecurity. Tonight, we're going to highlight substance abuse. Going back several years, we've all heard about this. At the time, our governor was serving as the Attorney General. Attorney General Healy joined 45 other states in a litigation called the National Opioid Settlement. There were manufacturers, there were distributors, pharmaceuticals. They were all defendants in this litigation. Defendants include J&J, Walmart, Teva, Allergan, CVS, and Walgreens. The key findings: unfair and deceptive sales practices, inadequate monitoring, and violations of their corresponding responsibilities. Their misconduct has led to a record over-dispensing, substance abuse disorders, overdoses, and residents continue to suffer. No community, no state has been untouched by this. Every facet of our society, I'm sure individuals who are here in this room, perhaps individuals listening at home, has been touched by this. It has been devastating. For the first time, public health as a discipline, HHS as a department, is going to have capacity to make a difference, to be able to deliver resources with collaborative partnerships in our community here in Plymouth, to be able to make a meaningful difference Prior to this, it has really been raising awareness and not much more. Sympathy and compassion has not been enough. We're now going to be able to make a difference with local resources. The town manager has made it very clear, the directive, we're going to be able to partner, and that's what HHS has done over the past several months, is to find out what are the resources in our local community here, to bring those together, to be the leader, and to integrate those to help individuals who are suffering and families who are in need. To the settlement. According to analysis, about $500 million are going to come to Massachusetts, right? Several million will come here to Plymouth. The Commonwealth, of those dollars, 60% will stay with the Commonwealth, HHS at the state level. 40% are going to go to the municipalities. There's a calculus. As you can imagine, a complex settlement of this nature, it is extremely difficult. However, there's assignment for each municipality, depending upon their population, fatal and non-fatal overdoses, the number of prescriptions. Plymouth was assigned a percentage, and that calculus has assigned to Plymouth over time about $3 million. Now, that I don't want to create any false expectations. That comes over time. Each of these defendants have a dollar amount that they have been assigned and a dispersal schedule, some as many as 18 years. There's a lot of money here it's going to come over time. But the directive from the town manager is to get these dollars out now. I have to tell you, most municipalities, to include the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, has not dispensed any dollars into their community. Plymouth is going to be an early adopter in that. In the first quarter, as you will hear from the commissioner next, there is a plan in place to not only to deliver the dollars, but dollars that are going to be reflective of the community itself. We're going to be hearing from the community members, individuals who have been affected, tragically affected by this, and continue to be. And services will be delivered in a responsive way using local providers. As you can probably recall, several months ago, funds became available at the town hall, at the town meeting. That's not going to be the case anymore. Actually, 2 weeks ago, the governor has allowed a special legislation where an account can be set up and where dollars will flow systematically and routinely. It's been difficult up till now. Data has been imperfect, and the dispersal has been difficult. But Plymouth is moving forward. This will scale. The first phase that you're going to hear about next is only the beginning of this. As more dollars become available, this project, this is phase one, if you can think of that, but this project will scale to be able to provide and include more service providers and to be able to deliver services to more residents and more community members. Prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery. The measure of our success is going to be how well we communicate with partners and how well we engage. Plymouth is well positioned to make a difference for the residents of the community. I'm pleased that I've been able to be a part of this initiative. Let me turn this back to Commissioner Brady.
Thanks, Jay. Awesome. Thank you, Jay. You see the timeline. It's aggressive. It's ambitious, but we can do this. We want to get these funds into the community. We're going to have community meetings. This month, an RFP will be issued to the public the beginning of February. Applications will be due back 1 month later. Grantees will be notified at the end of March. Memos of understanding will go out 4/1, and we will have that money out in April to the community. Okay, so Emily's going to speak a little bit about why this is important.
So as we just heard, and as we all know, opioids continue to have enormous impacts on families and communities in our town and our communities in our region. Recent BID Plymouth data shows that opioid use persists as a major behavioral health challenge and is closely linked to other health and human service issues within our community, such as mental health and housing. BID's data also shows that among people using substances such as opioids, 45% report using more since the COVID pandemic began, and we don't have any evidence of that pace slowing. Here are some key points up on this slide that we wanted to share with you, which highlight the importance of having community-level strategies like those that we will adopt with the support of the National Settlement Funds in order to combat the opioid epidemic. In Plymouth County, our town has the second highest number of residents identified by law enforcement to be at greatest active risk of overdose incidents. We also know that from January to September of last year, Plymouth County had 597 reported overdose incidents, and during those incidents, 70% of people received naloxone, and of these, 94% survived. So again, the importance of community-level strategies is exemplified right there. Now, of those survivors, 37% were given naloxone by a third party, meaning a friend, a family member, before first responders could show up, arrive on scene. So again, we wanted to show and highlight this data that's coming out very recently to exemplify the importance of having a community-coordinated response and community-level strategies that we can implement now that we have the power of these funds and the support that they will offer to our residents. And on that note, we received some guidance for municipalities so far, and there will be more forthcoming from the state. So under the Massachusetts subdivision agreement that we've agreed to as a town in order to accept these funds, our plans need to include direct community input, which we will be collecting at the community meetings that are scheduled for later this month on January 24th and 25th. We also need to address access to services and leverage existing resources. And we will be reporting, as required by the sub-agreement. Each year, we'll need to demonstrate how we gathered this direct community input, what strategies we selected, and how we expanded access. Now we're going to hear more from Michelle on our specific strategy.
Thanks again, and we're wrapping up. We know your time is extremely valuable. But, essentially, we really want to say that these funds will have a meaningful impact on a deep and complex societal issue. And we're excited is not a good word, right? We don't want this issue. But we are excited at the opportunity to have a direct impact from our local resources that so hard and earnestly work towards solving and treating some of these issues. So as mentioned, we're going to have 2 community forums, and this will be made public everywhere we can. It will be on the town website. It will be distributed. The flyer, we're going to have a community forum on January 24th, and that community forum is going to be here at Town Hall. And on the 25th, it's going to be at the library. So it's open. The first one here is a hybrid, so people can, tune in virtually. If people want to give feedback about what's impactful for them, there'll be a link on the town website that they can write in if they don't want to come to these forums in person. We want to hear from people. We want to hear from nonprofits that provide the services that help in this capacity. So we're excited for those and look forward to our community engaging. We appreciate your time. We're excited for this department, and we welcome any questions or feedback you might have.
Any questions or comments from Michelle or anybody?
Okay.
Mr. Canty?
Thank you to Michelle and the entire HHS team for being here tonight and presenting that. I'm particularly interested in sort of your first project here, having spent the last 10 years helping folks that are court involved dealing with substance use, particularly opioid related incidents. I would say that I work in the drug court, now called the recovery court at the Plymouth District Court. It has come up, the idea of what municipalities in our area are going to be doing with some of this money. There we have not only a court clinician that helps place people that are involved, we also have connections with High Point, with Clean Slate, with the Community Justice Support Center at in the Plymouth Industrial Park as well, which is a Department of Probation affiliated program. If at some point you would find it beneficial to come in and speak to the drug court staff, we have a staffing on Wednesday mornings from 9:30 to 10:30 usually. I think that is something that could be arranged and would be potentially beneficial to both sides. Having the history there, the judge that handles that drug court, Judge John Julian, also has handled, he's handled this drug court for the last 8 plus years, and he previously to that, and still concurrently, is also, he's the presiding justice in Barnstable, and he handles Barnstable drug court as well. So he has a lot of experience in that field in both of those arenas. It just could be another asset for implementing this plan in a way that would touch on all factors, if that's of interest.
Amazing. Absolutely of interest. You know, I refer back to the slide, and I'm serious. The P in help in our tagline is partnership. And if we can engage our community members, whether it be in this capacity specifically or any other, we're completely open to engaging, and we get more done in that capacity. So we would love to take you up on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Be in touch.
Okay.
Mr. Bletzer?
And to follow up on what Kevin said, I agree with him too. You know, we have resources in this town. We have a jail in this town. We have a hospital in this town, and we have a courthouse in this town. All three of those facilities, a lot of their work is done with substance abuse. You know, whether it's not just mental health, but there's, you know, alcohol and especially opioids. And, you know, working with, as you say, partnerships. There's three partnerships right there. As far as the court goes, you've met our presiding judge, and she could set up a meeting with our drug judge. Also, the former presiding judge there, who's retired and now works for the state, Judge Rosemary Minahan, is very involved in the opioid crisis, and she would love to have some input with you, and so that's going to be a key to, you know, the money that you use, how you use it. There's so many partners in this town that could really use some help.
Yep.
You know, you got the recovery center. I mean, I could go on and on.
Right.
So, yeah. So
And that's a good thing, right? We could go on and on because there's so many
Yeah,
resources
yes.
doing such good
this
work.
is a long time coming.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I
I
would
was-
love that.
I was so excited.
Select
Well,
board.
it's, you know, give me a call. We can
will.
set that up for you. And,
I will. Thank you.
it's-
And
yeah.
we're really partnering with BID as well. So we're
There
going
you
down
go,
that road already.
Because we all work
Yes.
together.
Yes, we do.
You know,
Yes.
we send them to them, they send them to us. I mean, it's, I say, us, the court, and
Yeah.
and also the jail.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so anyway.
Working with, in the
The sheriff.
future, maybe DA Cruz, and just looking at all the factors. Plymouth is the biggest small town, right?
Exactly. yeah,
So, thank you. I appreciate it.
And then within the opiate, obviously, we're the second biggest. A lot of that has something to do with the hospitals being here and all that, but we do have a real problem with in our town with the opioid crisis, so.
Yep, we're going to see this as an
Yeah,
opportunity
great.
to help.
This is great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Tax title presentation.
For 17 years, all of which have been in the Treasurer Collector's office. I'm here tonight to provide you with an overview of the tax title process. A couple of months ago, the Assistant Treasurer, Haley Stevenson, and I met with Derek and Brad to discuss some recent talk that was in the media regarding another community in Massachusetts in which homeowners' property was foreclosed on, and they were evicted and claimed to have not received any prior notification. That community sold their tax liens to a third-party company. Here in the town of Plymouth, we do not sell our tax liens, although we are allowed by law to sell them to a third-party company. We choose not to, and we provide those services ourselves, and we work closely with our tax title attorney's office, Capola and Capola. The process takes about a year from the time that we send out real estate demands until the time that we file for the foreclosure. We do our best to consistently stick to this time frame to make sure that the town does not lose their opportunity to perfect the tax lien. Also, we do that to familiarize the customers with the timing of our process. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into this process, and I'm going to do my best tonight to provide you with a quick overview. Real estate demands are generated at the end of a fiscal year after the fourth quarter installment, which is due May 1st. Demands can be added as early as the next business day after the due date of May 1st, and they are due 14 days from the date of issue. Here we have for you a 5-year comparison of the number of real estate demands that go out. So here we have from 2019 to 2023. As you can see here, it's roughly an average of about 2,300 demands a year, and it's pretty consistent. In addition to that, we have included the amount that was outstanding for the total of those demands that were sent out for those years. And as you can see, it's roughly around $4 million. So at the end of the fiscal year, there's about $4 million that is outstanding. And in addition, after the demands go out, we like to extend a couple of courtesies to the taxpayers as well to provide them with additional notification before we send the delinquent files to the attorneys. We do that by sending an additional final demand notice, is what we call it, and that's just a notice to inform them that the demand remains unpaid, and it gives them an opportunity to resolve that delinquent balance prior to sending the file to the attorneys, in which additional legal fees would incur at that point. And we have also added a courtesy of making phone calls. We take the time and effort to research phone numbers for the delinquent accounts that we see to locate the property owner. We do that through like a Google search or Fast People search. We also use other resources we have in our department, such as the Unipay system for online payments. If we see that they have previously made a payment online, we're able to kind of back into the system to get phone numbers. So we do make attempts to try to call everybody that has a past due balance prior to sending that file to the attorneys. And we continue to make phone calls as we go through this process. Early September, we send the delinquent file to the attorneys. At that point, that's when legal fees begin to accrue. They start off at $125, and the attorneys begin the title searches. We continue to work with the attorneys through this process, and around October, we will provide them with a breakdown that they're needed of the outstanding taxes, but we have to provide them with, real estate, CPA, Buzzards Bay Water District, water liens, any additional balances that are outstanding so that they can prepare for the legal advertisement. The notice of taking. So it is required by law that we advertise in the newspaper, in the local newspaper, any accounts that are outstanding prior to a tax taking. We advertise in the Old Colony Memorial any of the prior fiscal year's unpaid property taxes. The newspaper advertisement has to be posted in 2 public locations, and we use Town Hall and the public library. If payments are not received in full by the collector's office by 9 a.m. on the 14th day from the date of the advertisement, a tax taking is recorded at the Plymouth County Registry of Deeds. The tax taking, as I said, it occurs 14 days from the date of the newspaper advertisement. And from that moment, when the tax lien is recorded, the treasurer's office must wait 6 months before foreclosure proceedings can begin. At any time, the tax liens can be paid off in full, and upon payment in full, an instrument of redemption is prepared by our office, and it is recorded at the Registry of Deeds to release the tax lien. Here we have for you a 5-year comparison of the number of tax liens that are recorded each year. So as you can see, I mean, it's pretty consistent, but over the last couple years, with the extra efforts that our office makes to make the phone calls and to notify the property owners that have the delinquent balances, we've been able to reduce the number of liens that we record each year. Also, to the right is the balance that is added to our tax title receivables. So at the time that we place the lien, this increases our outstanding tax title receivables. And as you can see, that's roughly around $300,000 a year, and that's pretty consistent. The tax taking notice. We like to extend another courtesy. So after the tax taking, that typically appears in December, we like to send a notice, and that's usually early February, just to inform the property owners that a tax taking has been recorded at the Registry of Deeds on their property, and it also gives them a chance to pay the outstanding balance before we initiate the foreclosure process. So we usually give them a date in May to pay by, so it gives them 3 months to make arrangements to work at paying off that tax lien. So whether they take out a personal loan or whether they talk to their mortgage company or take out a home equity line of credit, those are just some examples, that allows them some of that time to try to get their finances in order to pay off the lien before the proceedings with the foreclosure begin. The foreclosure, in June after the tax taking, we prepare tax title packets that we send to the attorney's office. This includes the instrument of taking, the tax lien sheets. They want like a current year tax bill, and they use this information to prepare for the foreclosure petition that they file with the land court. Those petitions are filed typically between the months of July and August. Once the foreclosure petitions are filed, it now is at the discretion of the land court, and it's based on their time frame. And one of the next steps to follow is the land court will send out a citation to all interested parties. In that citation, they include a date for them to respond by. If a written response is received by the land court, they will go ahead and schedule a land court hearing, and they will need to appear before the land court judge, and they will set forth the terms of the redemption. They will issue a finding. In that finding, they will specify a date that the lien must be paid off in full by, and at the time, the land court judge will also set forth what is allowable for legal fees. If no response is filed or the taxes are not paid by the date issued on the finding, the court will issue a final judgment or foreclosure decree. The right of redemption. So once a property is foreclosed on, there is a 1-year right of redemption period in which the former property owner can request the Board of Selectmen to voluntarily allow the redemption of the property, and or they can petition the land court to request a vacation of judgment. During this time period, the town still has the right to sell the property at a public auction, prior to the 1-year right of redemption period expiring. After the foreclosures, we are able to sell those properties at a public auction, and any property that is taken for non-payment of taxes must be auctioned at a public auction. You cannot make any other sales with, individuals if they were to inquire on a specific property, that they may abut and they're interested in purchasing. You would still have to hold a public auction. Thank you, and do you have any questions?
Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Canty?
So that, the last slide about public auction, town must hold a public auction for the sale of any foreclosed property taken for non-payment of taxes. So that's only operative in the event that the town wishes to sell.
Correct.
If the town wishes to retain, that's how we get this, we have a large list of these properties. So those are ones that the town, for whatever reason, has not decided to put up for an auction.
That is
But
correct.
if we do want to sell it, that's the only mechanism.
You must hold a public auction.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, Dickie, Chairman, before you move on, there's one other piece to this, if you can move forward, Patty. Great job, by the way, too.
Thank you.
There's one last piece to this that, going forward, we would like to know where the board would sit on changing practice. There was no policy in place on this. The practice has been for over 30 years now that any tax title property that went to auction would have a deed restriction on it, that it would not be a buildable lot going forward. We looked up and down. There's no policy in place. There's no vote that was taken by a select board that voted that when the property went for auction, there would be a deed restriction in it. So it was just practice. So there's no policy to review. There's no policy to waive. But the question to you is, going forward, do we want to obtain more money and obtain more money for the parcel because the value will go up if we have no deed restriction on it? Now, there's one catch to that. The only catch is that any parcel that we take through tax title that has a plot on it already or a dwelling, you can rebuild on that. It's for a lot that does not have a dwelling, you cannot build on that lot. So the question to the board is, would you like to maintain that practice going forward with the deed restriction, or would you like to remove that? It would go for auction, and we can guarantee these properties will go for a significant more value than what they currently are.
Mr. Canty?
So Brad, can you describe the process that the town undertakes before making a decision to potentially auction a piece of property off, so we can know whether it's necessary or beneficial to have this policy going
Yeah,
forward?
so there's multiple, what's the routing sheets? I call them the routing sheets, or
Yes.
white sheets, routing sheets. And what that does is it goes through a list of different divisions and departments and committees in the town, and they put a hold on it if they do not want it to move forward. So any property that actually gets to the point of, okay, everyone's gone through it and checked off that there's no interest in it, that's when it would be brought forward to actually go on the docket to sale.
And what are the types of departments or other groups that look at it?
Do you know the names of them?
So we do, there's open space, there's conservation, environmental.
Engineering, there's a lot for drainage, affordable housing trust, town manager's office,
Okay.
I think conservation, did we say conservation? I believe they get a view, yep.
So by the time it's gone to auction, all those groups or departments have said there's no interest in this particular parcel.
Correct. And we've actually talked about changing the policy and the procedures on that. So rather than that routing sheet go to me in the town manager's office and then to conservation and then to engineering, we're going to pool all of them at one point and have a couple meetings a year to review all of them so we can map out and discuss face-to-face with everyone, is there a true need for this? Because when I look at it in my office, I may say, yeah, this is great, let's hold it for recreation, but it may go to somewhere else. And just to have that discussion face-to-face, I think, is more valuable than the sheet passing along, taking weeks to go through the process.
Is there a hierarchy of where it goes, or is it inconsistent as to who looks at it?
Every department will have to check it off. So it's not goes here to here to here. It just makes sure that everyone reviews it before it gets finalized and sent back to the treasurer collector's office.
And is there if two disparate, like say engineering was interested for drainage and conservation was interested in putting a restriction that prohibits drainage uses?
There hasn't been, and that's why I wanted to start this new policy and kind of meeting so we could talk that through.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Blitzer and then Mr. Helm?
I mean, if it's a
And then Mr.
buildable lot,
Bowman.
I would think it's not gonna get through all those groups. So, but I mean, if it's a buildable lot, I don't think we should restrict ourselves from trying to sell it and make some money for it. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me why,
There has been a few, and I'll tell you how this all came to be, is we had a few individuals who purchased them throughout the last 30 years, let's say, come forward and say, how do I get this deed restriction removed, and why was it put on there? So that, in the first week I was here, I got prompted with that question to look into this, and that's where we found that this dates back to almost over 30 years of deed restrictions on parcels. Now, just remember that this vote tonight would only be for parcels going forward.
yeah, because if they purchased it, not buildable,
They got to
they
steal
didn't
on
pay
it.
much for it.
Exactly.
So, but going forward, I mean, why would we restrict ourselves to, you know? But I find it hard to believe that a land that's buildable is gonna get that far, because it should be.
I can tell you
So-
there's parcels that were buildable that people want the restriction removed so they can build on them. So it's happened in the past.
No, I know, but I'm talking moving forward. If we foreclose on a property, we get the property, and I think we should be able to sell it for a profit and make money on it. So, I mean, it's, so I would like to change that so we could do that. Makes sense to me.
Mr. Helm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brothers, you mentioned what I was going to ask you about, because I'm aware of a handful of citizens who purchased with a deed restriction that was placed at closing. Were you ever able to uncover any evidence, written evidence of an actual policy to apply a deed restriction such as this when this was done? Was there, I know when we last talked about it last year, you had been unable to find any evidence there was actually ever a policy. It just sort of happened. Were you ever able to find evidence of an actual policy?
No, the only thing we were able to find was a draft of a policy back in 2005, and going through all the minutes, it was never brought forward to the board.
Okay, so we had a draft, but it was applied without actually being approved by the board. What are your plans to deal with these, or do you not plan to do anything about these citizens who purchased then have asked for, a change to the deed restriction and have actually been the reason for the change in this policy? What are your thoughts and plans to assist those residents?
I was hopeful we could make that an FY25 goal, along with the other 40 we'll have, and manage them the best we can. But I wanted to get square one. Phase one of this was to get going forward straightened out. I do agree that what reason we even came on this topic was because of the prior properties and looking at how we do business going forward. So I do want to take care of those. It just is, there's a few different ways people have already thought of to look at and charge back. But one mechanism, we need to find out what works across the board. And just because someone may pay more and someone got a better deal, that is what it is. We have to move on from that and be consistent and find one set formula of if someone wants to remove that restriction, what does that entail?
Yeah, well, you and I talked about a system which would involve looking at tax assessments of similar properties in the time period that this was sold. So tax valuations. Is that one of the potentials?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Brothers.
Yep.
John?
Patty, when these properties go to auction and they're sold, the revenues end up in the real estate account, Lynn?
So they go to the general fund.
They go to the general fund, okay.
Well, anything over and above what we receive for the outstanding taxes.
Okay, so,
And if I could add on quick, there is special legislation, it's essentially special legislation. There's legislation being talked about that would limit that. So anything we sold, let's say we there's $15,000 owed in back taxes on a parcel. We had about $5,000 in administrative costs, so let's say that totals 20. Right now, what the AG's office is telling us is to hold whatever we sell above the 20 in a holding account right now to figure out what they're going to do with that going forward. In other states, it was disclosed that that money actually resorts back to the former property owner prior to the town taking over. So there's questions right now of where that surplus money of what is overage on the tax that was owed, where that will go. So the general fund may not be getting that revenue going forward.
so this legislation, this is a state-level legislation, not a local initiative.
Correct.
Okay, so whatever we do, we have to make sure that whenever we're looking at a parcel of land, whether it's 1,000 acres or it's one, it is robust, and we are putting it under a microscope, and we are looking at it. And I know we have a process in place where everybody gets a crack at it, from affordable housing to conservation, and and there's 6 to 10 other entities that get that. But just want to make sure that we're making sure that it goes through a thorough vetting process before it gets to that auction point. And right now, until I have more information, I'm not inclined to support a change of practice as to what we're doing. With respect to individuals who got something and are looking to have it undone, then, if it's one buildable lot, then they owe us what's the going rate in the town of Plymouth for a buildable house lot. That's my take on that.
I just want to make a comment that there was a Supreme Court decision regarding other states. So this is sort of like it's like a federal, countrywide issue, and each state sort of has different rules. So Massachusetts has the AG's office or something like that came out with an advisory to Massachusetts communities who do sell anything at auction, that any of the proceeds that exceed what we're owed, that we hold in an account, because we may potentially have to pay those to the homeowner. Prior to that Supreme Court decision, that whole proceed from the auction went into the general fund.
And then eventually made it way through the system and came out as free cash.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so this is something that the feds or the Supreme Court is advising the states to figure out what they're going to have as far as a statewide policy, and we would hold that money in abeyance until that was defined.
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Canty?
So, Brad, if we're going to be holding, if we remove the deed restriction, it would increase the value of the lot. But if we're going to have to hold the excess above what is owed to us, both by back taxes and admin, legal fees, et cetera, say we, in that scenario you outlined earlier, $15,000 in back taxes, $5,000 in fees, we sell the parcel for $100,000. So then we've just made $80,000 that we have to put in abeyance or escrow or whatever until we find out what's going to happen with it. Maybe we're giving it back to the person that didn't pay the taxes, making them extra money. And then we're potentially stuck with a residential lot that's going to, in theory, consume more services than they're going to pay for in taxes, depending on where it is. It may make, while I think if that is how it's going to play out, there might be less of a reason to change the policy. But are we currently falling short in these auctions of making up the money that we're owed? So is this an issue of making more profit or rather making the town whole by removing the restriction?
I would ask Patty what's the delta of what we're taking in compared to what is actually owed for the part, like what's on back taxes?
We had one sale in the 16.
But to answer your question, Mr. Canty, I totally get it, because that's why you may want to vote to just reaffirm to hold, and we can come back at a later time when the AG's office tells us which way to go or not. But we started this discussion well before the AG's office ruled on any of this, so I just felt like bring it to you guys so we can say we viewed it, this is where our position. We'll come back to it if something changes, but I get the optics on that.
Okay.
We've probably had like 30 to 40 auctions of property in the last like 20 years. So since the last 3 treasurers that I've worked with, we had one auction where the sale of the lot didn't bring in what we were owed in taxes, and you can sell it. And we chose to do that, and I think the delta on it was just a couple of $1,000. So, but it was something that we were able to, sell. I believe it went to an adjacent property owner, kind of thing. But all the other ones have been in excess of what we were owed, or any fees or anything like that pertained. And most of them were just sales of very small parcels. You could probably count on one hand, how many were dwellings.
Okay.
It's really uncommon for the dwellings.
Okay. I think I would, although I think it could be, if we could make money off of it, could be beneficial to remove the restriction. If we're just going to be making money for the person that owed us money, I'm less inclined. But I think we could look at it. I know we have that large chart of pre-existing tax title parcels. Maybe if we knew like where all of them were in town on a map or something, and some of them are nearby each other with some zoning changes or something, we could zone, if we had like a collection of them that are in an area, maybe we could zone them commercial, and that would alleviate some of those concerns, if that would make sense. But kind of in doing it like piece by piece, if we are unable to recoup the profits from a sale in excess of what's owed, may not make the most long-term sense for us otherwise.
I would agree with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
Do we,
If there's no motion taken and no action on this, we will maintain practice, which is to have the deed restriction going forward.
well, would it, rather than, a future assistant town manager looking back through 30 years of documents and finding nothing, should we take a vote to affirm the practice in the short term? And
I agree with that as well.
okay, all right. I would make a motion that we affirm existing practice for the time being, and with the understanding that we may circle back when and if appropriate.
Motion by Mr. Canty, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mahoney, discussion. Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
No.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. Board and committee background policy discussion. Ms. McKay?
Good evening, Kate McKay, General Counsel. This is my first presentation before the board, so I'll just direct your attention up to the one slide I put together tonight. I'm here to talk about the options for quarrying appointed board and committee members. I was asked to check and see what those options might be and present them to you. I think, as you can see from the slide, there are 3 practical options right now. I'm just going to run through them and give a little bit on each one and then take questions if that's okay. The first option would be to quarry all appointed board and committee members, and that, based on the current town policy, would be done because appointed board and committee members are volunteers, and the current quarry policy that the town has addresses the volunteer person or the authority or the policy to quarry them is under number 9, where it talks about suitability of volunteer applicants. If you were to quarry all board and committee members, basically a quarry would be run on everybody that was appointed. You would give notice to that person that that was going to be done, and I would imagine that that may have a slightly detrimental effect on who would be willing to put themselves out there and volunteer. There is the second option of a limited quarry. The board, your board could certainly look at quarrying only appointed board and committee members, for example, who are likely to have direct or indirect contact with elderly, children, or a disabled population. If that was the case, then anybody applying for or volunteering for such a position would be notified that they would have a quarry run, and then it would be run. The appointing authority, whoever that would be, would have access to look at those quarries, and the appointing authorities would be placed on a need-to-know list within the town. You could go and review the quarry of whichever person you're appointing, and then that would be available to whoever that authority is. The last option is to make no change to how things are going now. There is no current quarrying of appointed board and committee members, so you could keep the status quo in place and continue on with the practice that has been going on.
Thank you. Any, Mr. Canty, Mr. Helm?
Keeping up my tradition of asking the first question tonight. What level of quarry access does the town have?
So the town, based on the fact that it's a municipality, has required, and it has required 1, required 2, and standard, I believe. It does not have access at 3 or 4.
Okay. And is that the same level that, because I know from talking to clients about issues, although I do specialize in innocent clients, that several individuals are concerned about quarries checks for volunteering for school trips and stuff like that. Is it similar to the level of access that schools have?
So it's my understanding that quarry 3 and 4, 3 is available for camps for children, and 4 is only available to the Mass Department of Early Education. So my inclination is to say that anything through a school or the Department of Education or a camp is a higher level at 3 or 4, and the town would not have that. We would be operating below a 3 or 4, a 1, 2, or a standard.
Okay. And then if we run the quarry and it comes back quarry, it has personal identifying information at the top of it, the individual's date of birth, social security number, their current address, their mother's maiden name, other stuff like that. What do we do with the quarry, and does it become a public record that would be more discoverable to folks than a quarry otherwise would be through something like a FOIA request or something like that?
So if the board was to look to appoint somebody and run a quarry, that quarry would be run by one of the town employees who has the authority to run those quarries, and it would be kept and stored in accordance with the quarry policy that the town has already put in place, and that is modeled off of the DCGIS policy. There's requirements for how long they're stored and how they're stored, how securely they're stored. So that policy would continue to control whatever was produced when that quarry was run, but the way that the appointing authority would be able to review it would be to have each individual person of the appointing authority, for instance, the select board, be placed on the need-to-know list, and the quarry, envisioning this is how it would work, would be in HR, for example. If you're on the list, you can walk in and you can review it, and the quarry would stay in HR. It would not be distributed. It would not be available for general public consumption. And then it would be retained in accordance with the policy.
So then if somebody was curious why an individual wasn't appointed to a board and they filed a FOIA request, it wouldn't be turned over as part of the documentation in relation to that appointment?
No, and I think actually number 5 on the quarry policy would actually control, which talks about when an adverse decision is made based on the results of a quarry, there's a procedure to follow, and that person is notified, and then according to the policy that the town has adopted, it would go through that. So I don't think a FOIA request would be the way that person would be able to find out. They would have a more immediate way to find out under number 5 as to why they were not chosen.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Helm, then Mr. Blitzer.
Thanks, Kate, for coming in to talk to us about this, given recent events that we went through. In your slide, each case that you give seems to indicate that the quarry is run after they've been appointed. Is that the case?
So the board, depending on the policy that you adopt, I think could either choose to run the quarry pre-appointment, or you could make an appointment conditional upon a quarry being run.
Okay. I guess I won't ask you. Well, I will ask you, which do you feel is the most appropriate? Which is you're an attorney. I wonder if there are issues involved, and legal issues, in appointing someone and then taking away the appointment based upon a failed quarry check, because that would be public information. Maybe not the quarry, but the fact of what happened to them would be public information. Or would it not?
Well,
Obviously, they would not be on the board after having been appointed, so it would be public.
That aspect of it would certainly be public. I'm not sure that the reason why would be public unless that particular applicant decided to make it public and disclose that he or she had their appointment rescinded because of their quarry. I think the advantage to doing it prior to appointment is it avoids that conditional appointment. I think if you want to do an appointment conditional upon, it just adds that extra step that if it comes back as a problem, it requires the extra step of undoing what was done. So I think.
And that extra step, is that a public process, since the board, let's say the select board, appointed somebody? Is it a public process to remove their appointment?
I would actually refer that question back to the board. My inclination is to say, how do you unappoint somebody? I would imagine it appears on an agenda somewhere for the select board.
That is how we've done it in the past when there have been issues with certain members.
I think it would be semi-public at that point. At least the unappointment would be public.
Right, and the charter requires an appointing board or entity can only remove someone for good cause. So I would imagine there'd have to be some type of a hearing, whether that be an executive session or open session, about their reputation or about what we found out in the quarry. So I think I agree that doing it prior to the appointment would be the cleaner option.
So I agree with Mr. Canty as well. But should we decide otherwise, Kate, would we be able to remove somebody from an appointment in executive session as opposed to public session?
I would say that if the reason for the unappointment, if the unappointment was going to be as a result of discussion of their reputation, character, that exception to the open meeting law, then I would imagine that unappointment for that reason should take place in executive session, because the board would be meeting to discuss that person's character, reputation.
So
if anyone was on the board.
you believe that if we were to opt for Corey after appointment, if somebody needed to be removed, we could do that in executive session, in your opinion?
If the reason is for their
Okay.
reputation, character,
Yeah.
then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, eventually it would go to open session, but I think the discussion about that and the discussion about the character and the reputation and the details of it would be in executive session, though.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bletzer?
Hey, Harry, I think I might have an answer for your question. I've actually been through this process when I first got on the PGDC, and I don't like to rehash bad things, but we found a member that we uncovered some ethics violations with this member. This was back right after the PDC dissolved and the PGDC started. I was new on that, 3 months on that board when we uncovered this. So I made a motion to remove him, and they said, oh, you can't do that. This is what you have to do. So what we did was we had an executive session, and he could have a representative with him. And so we questioned him, everybody had questions, and after we questioned him, then we summarized, what we felt, and after that, I was able to make a motion at that point to recommend writing a letter to the select board to have that gentleman removed. That's how the process worked. We asked him to resign, he wouldn't resign, so that was the process. So 2 weeks later, we went to executive session with the select board, and he could have a representative with them, and our lawyer was going to present. I ended up presenting because the lawyer didn't have as much background as I had on the whole situation. So we presented to the board, and at that point, the board said, "Look, we don't want to do this. Will you just resign?" He wouldn't do it. So they asked the question, do we have any legal ramifications? The town or this PGC, both lawyers, ours and the town, said, no, so-and-so, he's got at least 2 ethics violations. So at that point, they removed them unanimously off the board. And that's how the process worked. And so that's how all these committees, if somebody is, whatever it is, I mean, he ended up paying an ethics violation a few months later, so it was good cause. With that being said, this situation we're talking about, we made an appointment, and it was in the paper, so I'm not going to name names or anything, go into it. But the bottom line was, once we found out, now this gentleman was null-prost. He was not convicted. He was, and I'm going to tell you right now, the media tried to interview. I wasn't going to get involved because there was going to be a lawsuit. I mean, if we after appointing him and decided that we're taking him off of that committee because of something he was null-prost, never convicted of. What's that? So. Anyway, we're opening up a can of worms here. We've got to be careful. It should be done before the appointments are made, and everybody could have the information and make a decision. But using a Corey check as your reason not to hire somebody, you open up yourself to liability, I believe. So, and I don't want to get into that situation. If I have the information in front of me, I'll make my decision. but it's certainly not because what are our standards, Kate? You have an OUI, you can't be on a board or committee? Well, that's going to, a lot of people have had that. You know, what is the standard? You know, what crime prohibits you of being on a board or committee? Well, anyway.
Mr. Mahoney.
So I agree with, I think, a couple of the comments where it's a lot cleaner if this is done at the beginning. And I certainly, I don't want to embrace option 2 because, and you're picking and choosing who undergoes that process. So you can put this out to Kate or Derek. Does it make the application process more cumbersome for volunteers when they apply, and we're going to go through this process in 2 to 3 months? They want to volunteer for a committee. So does it really add any additional work for them, just applying for whatever committee they're applying for? Or all the work is just a little bit of an incremental administrative work on a town employee?
Well, it's a little of both. So obviously, the applicant has to fill out the query form and has to give permission for the town to run the query. And then, you know, as you pointed out, there will be some work on the back end, on the administrative side, to run those queries. We've talked about that. We think that that's manageable. But I think what's important to understand that we already struggle with filling our boards and committee vacancies. And so running a query, I think, will prevent some of those potential candidates from applying. I can say that, and I think you heard from Attorney McKay, that a query isn't a catch-all. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to catch some folks that have, as Selectman Blesser pointed out, moral or ethical issues that may not come up on a query check. So I think we just got to understand that some of the unintended consequences from running queries.
What is, once this staff member gets a query, what is the time frame for the completion? Is that just a couple of hours, a few days?
The time to run the query and get it back?
Right.
I would have to ask Jackie to be sure. I don't think it takes more than a day.
Okay.
Maybe 2 days, but I can certainly check and get back to you on that. Go ahead.
So the last question I would have, both Kate and Derek, is that aside from queries, have we looked at just going more robust or a deeper dive into the questions on the generic application? And then if something were to arise in the future, it could be brought to the board, and the board would act accordingly, maybe remove that individual because we found an information that indicated that the initial application was not accurate. Is that an option, or is it basically these are our best options?
I think that's why we're here, because we had this already happen. So this is why we asked to have this person.
But you see,
And so, you know, we know that there was an applicant that, you know, probably had a background that if we had known about it, you know, we probably would have made different decisions. That person has since resigned. But again, that individual who has resigned, is actually it's the reason why we're having this conversation, would not have been caught in a query. So if we ran a query thinking that it's going to be all of our safety mechanism, this would not have happened with this last candidate.
And I can just add something else that might make it more concrete, I guess, for lack of a better word. The highest, the most information that you would get on a query check is going to be, to my understanding, if you're able to run at a level 3 or a 4, because those levels are how the system is set up to give the most access because of the people that person is interacting with. So as you come down the ladder of access, the amount of things that are viewable on a query are kind of whittled down, either by time or by whether or not there was a conviction, how long ago the action took place, so whether or not there's anything open and pending right now, or if everything's closed. So to echo Mr. Benjisi, there the quarry is not a silver bullet. It's not going to catch every single person, every single thing, either because of the level of access that the town has, or just the nature of what that person has on their record is sometimes not going to interact with the level of access that's allowed.
Thank you very much. I agree that it should be done prior to appointment, because to me, that's why we're here. And we're having this discussion, and I've seen other people get elected, like to this board, and problems arose afterwards, and it's not very easy just to, and for the fact about going public and all that, if they're never appointed, then it eliminates all that. So if I'm going to support one of these, it's going to be pre. And if I do support it, it's to be done naturally, legally, and through, I suggest, the HR department. And I'm definitely going to support it, just for my own reasons and my own feelings. If somebody knows that there's something really not good on there, then they probably aren't going to apply. And if it's really not good, then they probably shouldn't. So that's just my little ghetto on it. So, any other discussion or a motion from the board? Mr. Helm?
Yeah, I have another question for Kate. Just really quickly, if we do the appointment, which I'm inclined, I agree with Chairman Quindle on that. Do we put in the application, because we're still going to have that form they fill out, do we put in that they will be subject to a Corey background check?
I think you have to, and I think the Corey acknowledgement form, it would be what they would sign, acknowledging that a Corey is going to be run.
Okay, thank you. I thought so.
Mr. Canty?
I have one question and then discussion, depending on the. But Kate, does the applicant have an opportunity to explain the results of the Corey under the Corey policy?
According to the current Corey policy, I believe that they do. I have it. It may be, if I can just look at it. So HR in this hypothetical would make sure that it lined up with the person that was being queried was the person whose query was in front of them. And then a determination would be made. They're notified of the decision. It may be currently that they're notified of the adverse decision and the applicant's given all of that information. Just quickly trying to read. I can certainly let you know. I do believe they have a chance to be informed of the decision and correct any mistakes or any, if that's not really them that's being queried in front of them, but whether or not they have a chance to explain and beg, for lack of a, or revisit the issue. Yeah, I'm not sure that the current policy extends that to a volunteer.
Right, and I mean, the reason I ask, because as I don't need to tell you this, but for others, these offenses, somebody could get charged with like an assault and battery, which reads like this person punched somebody in the face, but technically that is an assault and battery, but so is grabbing someone's wrist without their permission. That's also an assault and battery, a harmful or offensive touching with no legal justification. I think the ability to explain it would be beneficial. I think I would also point out that, not to be ageist, but number two, direct or indirect contact with the elderly. It would be difficult to be on a board or committee in Plymouth and not have direct or indirect contact, considering that a lot of people that are involved in Plymouth government could be characterized as elderly.
So perhaps the board might want to add in unsupervised direct or indirect, or unsupervised direct. There's certainly some modifications that could be made, but that's really kind of taking from the way that the current levels of access read right now. But I certainly think it could be modified to accommodate that. And just to jump back to your prior question, Mr. Canty, under 7I of the current policy, any other relevant information, including information submitted by the candidate or requested by the hiring authority, is also, that can also go into the consideration. So you're asking if the candidate could submit things. Under I, he is allowed to.
Okay. I think number one would be the best place to start for all appointments or reappointments that come up. This is something that if we do notice a significant chilling effect and a significant decline in applicants for boards and committees, we could always revisit. But that seems to be the most sensible place to start. It's easier to ratchet down than it is to ratchet up on something like this, given that we're where we are right now. So that's sort of my thoughts at present.
Any other thoughts or comments? Do we have a motion? Mr. Canty?
I would make a motion that we adopt a policy to query all positions, all applicants for any board or committee that is applying for an appointment or a reappointment to that board or committee.
Second. Discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
In this motion, is it going to be used pre-appointment?
Yes.
Okay.
Prior to the appointment.
Any more discussion? Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Passes unanimously. Thank you for all your hard work, Kate. Nice job, and Derek.
Thank you.
Article 10, parcel transfer to the Affordable Housing Trust. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. For the record, my name is Patrick Farah. I'm planning staff. And in this unusual circumstance, I'm here representing the Affordable Housing Trust. Along with me in the audience is Stephen Michael Palmer, who is actually on the Affordable Housing Trust. And he will be, he's here just in case there are any kind of questions that go beyond my purview. I'd like to thank the town treasurer, Patty Meacham, earlier providing that discussion and the presentation about tax title properties. I know she's not here right now. Because as staff, I do work with that office frequently to look at foreclosed properties for different type of land uses. She had mentioned a meeting a couple months ago that occurred with both Derek and Brad, town manager, assistant town manager, about a process moving forward in looking at tax title or foreclosed properties. And the question that came about from me to the group at that meeting was, when was this going to be implemented? And they said, we'll figure as of January 1st. So I am here to talk to everybody, to the audience and to the board about Article 10 and 11 on properties that were submitted back in December. So I met the prior threshold of this discussion. So with Article 10, this is basically the Affordable Housing Trust is seeking to get authorization from, or a favorable vote from the Board of Selectmen, as well as the Advisory and Finance Committee, and through town meeting to convey 3 properties that we found that are foreclosed, that are deemed potential for affordable housing. So what is affordable housing? The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, considers affordable housing if housing costs including utilities, does not exceed 30% of a household's income. Unfortunately, Plymouth is not at that 10% affordable housing threshold. I guess the state looks at we should have at least 10% of affordable housing in every community. As of August of 2023, there were 1,788 units included, which is 6.37% of the total 28,074 units in town. So we do have a ways to go. And Article 10 hopes to work toward that 10%. The 3 lots are shown on this list, and basically to see if the town would vote to transfer the care, custody, management, and control of the parcels listed below as on file with the town clerk, and in full disclosure, that will happen tomorrow. From the town treasurer for tax title purposes to the Affordable Housing Trust for the purpose of affordable housing, and authorize the Affordable Housing Trust to execute any and all instruments that may be necessary to effectuate the vote under taken here under, or take any other action relative thereto. So I'm going to go over real quick the 3 parcels, and you can see on the recording date on your right-hand side of that chart. These are the actual the final foreclosure document recordings. So we're looking at May of 2014, March of 1996, and November of 1971. So there is some history there. All right, let's go over the first one, which is map 74, lot 3321. It's located in Manomet. You can see on the locust map on the top left-hand corner. I think I can do that. No, it doesn't show. Off of Snowberry Lane and Crest Street in Manomet. It's a 1/4 acre lot, and it was foreclosed, like I said before, on May 2014. As you can see on the ortho maps, it is fairly wooded, and is located within the R25 zone. So what staff has performed while doing this vetting process of these 3 properties, we went to inspectional services and actually requested a zoning permit app. And we wanted to make sure that these were indeed buildable or potentially buildable lots. So on this lot, it is deemed a buildable lot through special permit, and the reason is for access. I'll go back. If you take a look at Snowberry Lane and Crest Street, they're small roads, and typically it would require, if there was going to be a building constructed on that property, that it would have to go up to current road standards. So that's why there would be it would have to go through the special permit process. All right, the second lot is map 96, lot 19-49. This is out in West Plymouth, right off of Acacia Pond. And it's located off Colchester Drive and Guild Road. And I do apologize, it's not in Manomet, it's in West Plymouth. It's a 1/4 acre lot, and it was foreclosed back in March of 1996. You can see, again, fairly wooded lot. It's there's not going to require much grading on both of those lots. It's fairly, the topography is fairly stable and even. And this is deemed also as a buildable lot with no special permit required. So with the discussion that the board had with the town treasurer about properties that are foreclosed that are buildable, while we don't see many of them, I was fortunate to find these 3 lots. So this is definitely a buildable lot. And the third lot is off of Wareham Road, just north of the Red Brook subdivision. It's right around 3 acres, and it was foreclosed back in November of '71. Now, when you can see on this ortho map is that large swath that goes roughly through over half to two-thirds of that lot. That's the transmission line, one of the main transmission line corridors for Eversource. You can't build anything on that. However, if you look to the south, just over bisecting that lot, that's a wooded area, and I calculated roughly about 3/4 to almost 1 acre parcel. And it is in the RR zone, which is 3-acre zoning, so this would actually comply with that RR zone for one lot, possibly maybe a duplex. And again, Inspectional Services did say that this is a buildable lot. So I'm here to answer any questions, or Mr. Palmer.
I have a question.
Mr. Blitzer?
Thank you for your presentation. I got a question. Why has it taken so long to identify these properties? And one was 1971, 2004.
Great question. So what happens is, as far as I know, for the 17 years that I've been employed at this town, not many committees or boards look at the tax title properties. We all know that there are the list of many hundreds of them. The vast majority of them are common open space areas of a subdivision that the homeowner association either went defunct or never was created. A lot of drainage lots, road layout lots. The vast majority of these lots are not buildable. Okay, all the easy stuff has already been built on. How this kind of flew under the radar, great question. I don't have the answer. However, through the Open Space Committee, as you may know, that I'm support staff of, that Open Space Committee looks at properties. I vet through them through this process. We go through this routing sheet process that was mentioned before. And most times, the property is landlocked or there's some sort of restriction on it. The reason why these were never found before, I have no idea, but they were found.
So my next question, and I don't know if maybe Steve and Michael Palmer can answer it, but what are your plans for these 3 lots? Do you have plans?
So if there is a favorable town meeting vote, these 3 lots will be conveyed to the Affordable Housing Trust, and they will determine where those lots will go, whether it's Habitat for Humanity, or another situation where a nonprofit, I guess. But maybe Mr. Palmer can speak to this.
Come on up, Mr. Palmer.
Stephen Michael Palmer, Chairman of the Plymouth Redevelopment Authority, as well as the Vice President of the Housing Trust, which we are talking about today. The fact is that these particular parcels that Charlie has discovered are buildable. So I went around to talk to everybody that were abutting this property, and everybody says they're non-buildable, and there's conservation, and there's turtles living there, et cetera. So there's drainage problems, but, who wants it in their backyard? So what happens, Charlie, is that if town meeting approves it, if these butters don't show up and, it's all favorable, that, yes, these are going to the Housing Trust. The Housing Trust will take these pieces of property, these parcels, and sometimes they give it to us, which is a redevelopment authority, like 21 Strand Ave, and we get money out of grants from the state or the federal government. And hopefully we can, partnership with the Plymouth South High School, which has a tech program, maybe we can build a house there. Maybe we can, start, because fact is that the Plymouth Redevelopment Authority is bogged down with lotteries, you know how those work, et cetera. And we feel that, my board feels, and the Board of Affordable Housing Trust feels that, these are buildable. There's a house on 37 Indian Ave in Plymouth and Manomet that we gave to the Habitat for Humanity, and we gave them $85,000 to rehab a house that was dilapidated and it was tax title. And the fact is that this town of Plymouth, and I tip my hat off to them, gave $85,000 to the Habitat for Humanity, and a house is going to be built there, and it's going to be lorried off, et cetera, where the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has this $56.9 billion, and Susan Moran only came up with 45. So we came up with double that, and I think that's quite an accomplishment for this town, and I commend them. But back to these 3 lots, Charlie. Did I answer your question about how it's going to be built? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? John?
So Patrick, on these 3, Mr. Palmer brought up concerns from some of the abutters of these 3 locations.
Right.
But you've done the due diligence, and you're convinced or you're comfortable with saying that they're buildable, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So my primary concern is I just want to make sure that if it's successful at town meeting, that Mr. Palmer and his group and yourself, that whatever we put there is consistent with what is in that neighborhood. You know what I mean? It just has to
agree.
be
Right.
consistent, and you don't want to go into a neighborhood with small 1,000-square-foot homes and put up a 2,500, something that's out of place. And so there'll be, and then with respect to that last one, you said it was 2.99 acres.
Right, it's essentially a 3-acre parcel.
Okay, I'll give you the ability to round up that. Geez, it's
0.01,
not even a tenth. It's 100, exactly. That's the term, the 100th of an acre. But having said that, the worst you could see there is a duplex, correct?
I am not capable of, or I don't have the ability to answer that question. The way we're looking at it now is for a single-family home. However,
And I'm okay with looking at it that way, but I'd hate to relinquish control to, or see Mr. Palmer's group relinquish control to another entity, and then we end up with something that is not, because it's a 3-acre parcel, that is out of place down in that section of town. I'm okay with a single family. You could even talk me into a duplex, but if we're going to get beyond that, I would be very wary of signing off on getting rid of that one.
and I understand that. The thing is just south of there on Red Brook, those are apartment buildings. So they're multi-unit structures that are right down the street.
And I hate to bring up this other aspect here, but this 2.99 acre lot, would this have been sufficient for a public safety building? And we wouldn't have had to take a 2-acre donation from Red Brook? You don't want to touch that one?
I don't have any
Okay, all
response
right.
to that.
Just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Excuse me, Patrick?
Sure.
But only about 1 acre or 3/4 the acre they can really build on, because the other is public safety.
It's within the
utilities.
transmission line
Yeah, yeah.
corridor, which is
Right.
unbuildable.
Right.
Eversource has an
So
easement
it's
on
not-
there.
You can't build on the whole 3 acres.
I'm aware of that, but
Yeah.
because it's 3 acres, does it give them the ability to jam a little bit more in that southern portion of that lot? Because that's where I was getting at.
Great question. I can circle back. I can ask the appropriate people for that, but at this time, I don't have that answer.
Any other questions from the board? We have a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Mahoney, second by Mr. Blutzer. Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blutzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. I do have one more question. I don't know if it's for Derek or you, Patrick, but could we do a policy or something change so when these come out of tax title, anything that might be buildable gets the nod of somebody, then notifies open space or whatever committee so it doesn't slip through the cracks like those three?
The open space is one of the committees that would get this notification through the tax title process, and as we mentioned before, Affordable Housing Trust. But one thing I can say is we have been working with the assessor's office, and Selectman Helm is aware of this. Mr. Brothers has been working on it for the past year and a half with Mr. Helm. We have a spreadsheet of about 1,200 parcels of land that have no detail, have no description of what they are. I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the Land Use Acquisition Committee, and they're going to go through those 1,200 lines to identify all these parcels of land. So to Selectman Butz's earlier point, hopefully we can uncover a lot of parcels of land that for whatever reason have been overlooked over the decades. So we'll report back as soon as we get closer to that.
Okay, you answered that. Thank you. Patrick?
Mr. Chairman, if I may just add to this, those 3 parcels did go through the routing sheet process. And in case the board does not know, that I'm typically the chain of custody of those routing sheets. So when there is a new tax title property recently foreclosed and totally vetted through the treasurer's office, and someone shows an interest, whether it's a board, committee, a resident, or anybody, if there's any interest, a routing sheet is created. I work with the treasurer's office in putting together a packet, maps, the foreclosure documents, usually a final decree or judgment, as well as the instrument of taking, and any other type of information that be pertinent to review. Then I physically bring that routing sheet packet to every department and division that's within that routing sheet, and they have an opportunity to respond. They write it down, they initial it and date it, of whether there's no interest or to keep for a certain thing or to auction off. And then when it's all, and then they come back to me, and basically the way it works is I'll give it to, let's say, engineering, they give it back to me. I give it to the town manager's office, they give it back to me, and so on. So there's no loss. And the reason for that is that many years ago, there was a committee member who had a whole list of them and then lost them. So I had volunteered, I'll be the chain of custody and make sure that I know where they are at all times. The new process that we're starting to negotiate or starting to discuss, I think will be, or I hope to have actually be an improvement on the current process. But I think the current process works.
Okay,
I can say that because I do.
thank you. Article 11.
All right. So I just want to, before I get started on the article, just kind of read the mission of the Plymouth Open Space Committee, for those who are not aware. The mission of the Open Space Committee, of the Plymouth Open Space Committee, is to advocate for the preservation and maintenance of natural open space for current residents as well as for future generations in order to protect our aquifer, our environment, and the character of the town. So that being said, the Open Space Committee is seeking a favorable vote tonight from the Board of Selectmen and to go to town meeting for 2 tax title properties so that they will be conveyed over the care and custody, to the care and custody of the Conservation Commission. Map 59, lots 2 and 3, they're right together, and I'll bring up a map in a second. Both are landlocked properties within the Ponds of Plymouth subdivision. And both of them are what's called classic pine barrens. They're globally rare habitat. We took a a site visit about a month ago, and it is absolutely stunning pine barrens. If someone wants to see an excellent example, these two properties definitely show it. So I have to provide a clarification to the slide. Both lots are contiguous with 7 acres of conservation land on the left side of Arbor Ridge, that street that through that subdivision. And across the street, there's another 7.6 acres of protected open space, so close to 15 acres. Just to the south of the 2 lots that are highlighted in blue is the Colonial Water Company wellhead facility, and that is the water company and the source of all the water for the Ponds of Plymouth subdivision. These lots will provide meaningful natural environment access for the local neighborhood. And just again, they're both landlocked. You can see that there is no road frontage on these 2 lots. So what I did here was I kind of zoomed out, and you can see all the existing protected open space, which is in green, and the yellow lots are tax title properties. So there is a fair amount of tax title properties in here, too. Over 163 acres of protected open space and over 42 acres of tax title property. And that's what I have, and I look forward to a favorable vote if possible.
Mr. Mahoney.
So Patrick, on the topic of water, so this is adjacent to the wellhead
Correct.
that provides water to the ponds of Plymouth.
Correct.
So so to the left of that wellhead is dense residential development.
Yes.
And so so you're ultimately giving them about 30 of, so I'm assuming that where you have Colonial Water Company up there, that area is open space? Or, I mean,
It's actually a large building. It's that tank where the wellhead is.
Okay.
And that extracts, there's a lot of sand that's around, it's kind of been denuded, actually. But the 2 properties...
But it's not permeable surface.
It is,
All of it.
well, a lot of it is permeable because it's Carver Sands. You do have the building
My
that's in the
mistake.
middle.
Aside from the building, it's not impermeable.
Correct.
Okay. That's my point, yep.
It does provide recharge area. It is part of the Area 3 Aquifer Protection Zone.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Wish of the board?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Mahoney, second by Mr. Canty. Mr. Helm?
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Have a great night.
Fiscal 25 budget, Mr. Brandisi.
Okay, so as we presented last Tuesday, we had the opportunity to meet with all the board members, answer all your detailed questions. So we are requesting the board vote in favor of a balanced budget to be moved forward to the Advisory and Finance Committee of $301,551,299. It's at the top. Yep, yep. Mhm.
It's a big one.
Happy to answer any questions.
I'm just looking to see if any hands are up. I'm checking the landscape. Mr. Canty?
Derek, I know you we went over this last week, but could you briefly describe what the community, including the taxpayers, is getting from that budget?
Sure.
In terms of what that money will do and where it's going?
Absolutely. So this budget represents an increase of approximately $17 million. Within that $17 million, on the town side, the budget increases by approximately $2.7 million. The school department's budget increases by approximately $5.2 million. We have fixed costs, which includes our salary reserve of $3.1 million. And again, these are estimations, so this actually is 3.175064. In that salary reserve, we have embedded $3.6 million as a set-aside for negotiations. Debt service is just a little north of $2 million. We raised $382,000 to go on the recap. In this budget, you'll also be voting on the enterprise funds, which includes a little more than $1 million increase on the enterprise funds. And then we set aside $1.5 million for infrastructure, specifically for our roads program. We set aside $500,000 for the nuclear mitigation stabilization account and additional $500,000 for our facilities stabilization account. So in total, that represents new expenditures at $17,165,832.
So, thank you, Derek. I appreciate the summation. For anybody that didn't watch last week or was confused by anything that happened last week, the proposed budget that the Select Board is putting forth does, as we discussed last week, eat into the excess levy capacity, which, as we learned last week on the slide, if the town had gone closer to the levy as we're proposing to at this time, going within about $2 million of that excess levy capacity ceiling, we would have had, over the last 5 years, about $27.7 million to address some long-term known needs that the community has, such as our roads deteriorating, or at least not getting better. We had a presentation several months ago about how we're basically treading water on the roads, but we're not making that forward progress that we want to. It also helps to address a hot button issue recently, which was the future of the Holtec property, by having some money set aside to put towards the Nuclear Mitigation Stabilization Fund, and have a conversation with town meeting about the use of the existing and new money going into that fund. Facilities are a known issue ever since the town sewer exploded back in February of 2015, if memory serves. I don't think facilities maintenance has ever slipped from outside the top 3 in our priorities. Sometimes it's number 1, sometimes it's number 3, but I don't think it's ever farther away from that. That's a known issue. If we don't repair things like our roads and our facilities due to wanting to keep the taxes lower, it's actually costing us more money, because those things are deteriorating further and getting worse, and then we're repairing them at a worse level than we would have if we'd been more proactive about those things. So those are priorities that the board has, because they're priorities and needs that the community has. We're also putting money aside in the salary reserve to be used for contract negotiations. We are upcoming in the time where we will be entering into negotiations with all the unions on the town and school side. Obviously, our employees are going to be looking for some increases in those contracts. As any employee does that stays in a job, they want to be given fair compensation. They certainly don't want to be losing ground as cost of living increases go up. We are putting money aside in excess of what was proposed from the original budget that the school committee put forth, to help with both town and school contract negotiations. So that 3.6 number for salary reserve will be dedicated to the purposes of upcoming contract negotiations, kept in salary reserve so that it doesn't go to any other purpose on either the town or the school side, and is instead safe there for those purposes. And further, we had talked about, we don't know what state aid numbers are going to be yet, but last week we talked about maybe in the future we adjust this schedule so that we could have some more concrete information about state aid as it comes up. Last year, state aid increased approximately $1.2 million over the prior fiscal year, and we had, in the board, had talked about committing to what that delta is going to be for state aid between what it was in '24 versus what it's going to be in '25, putting that into salary reserve also for contract negotiations with a dedicated 69% to 31% split. 69% is the current makeup of the total combined budget that is dedicated to the schools. 31% is all the town side, so your police, your fire, your DPW, everybody that works in this building, all the town side employees. So we are doing what we can to be proactive and responsible as much as we can towards our employees and their needs, because we understand that those are the people that do the work and deliver the services that our residents demand. As former chief of the fire department, Ed Bradley used to joke at FinCom meetings on the budget, he could make the costs go down, he said, if you could make the phone stop ringing. Well, the phone isn't stopping ringing. In fact, it's ringing more and more every year. So that is why we need these employees. We know how to retain employees because we get better work out of experienced employees than we do out of brand new folks, and it costs money to onboard folks constantly. We understand as a board that this is an increase and that this is going to have to be well explained to town meeting and to the residents. I personally am going to commit to doing my best to articulate and answer any of the questions related to why we're doing this, why it's in the best interest of Plymouth, why now is the right time to be making these types of decisions. But we need to address some historical underspending and the unforeseen and unrecognized costs that has incurred upon this community. When I ran to move Plymouth forward, and this is part of what we need to do in order to move Plymouth forward, is to appropriate the money as responsibly to meet the current and future needs of this community. I've heard from some feedback from some members of some unions that they wanted more than they are seeing themselves getting under this proposal. I understand that. But this is the money that we have, and this is the money that we are able to put forward. All of us recognize the sacrifices that those folks have made, but we also recognize the other priorities that the community has. And as I said last week, I wish, and I think many of my colleagues wish, the only problem that Plymouth had was paying our employees what they deserve. Unfortunately, we do not have the luxury of living in that community. But I think this budget is a responsible budget for the present and future needs of Plymouth, and I intend to support the budget proposal that we talked about last week and are here to vote on as presented this week. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Mr. Mahoney?
So I'm going to tell a story, and then I'm going to do an editorial. And Kevin, I want to thank you for doing a complete summary of the budget. I agree with the budget. I support the budget. And I don't want to go over anything that Kevin just did because that was pretty solid. So I believe in 2018, I attended a Boston Red Sox game. I went in with we have a sister city relationship with Shishigahama, Japan. I went into a Red Sox game with the Japanese delegation. We took a air-conditioned Plymouth school bus in, and it was a miracle. I think Rick Porcello pitched a complete 9-inning game. They beat the Yankees 3-1. The game was over in 2 hours and 10 minutes, which was a miracle, and we were out of there. We got on the bus on the way home, and it was dark. And buses, they have these big green seats, and I started to slink down into my seat, close my eyes, because I was going to sleep for the 45 minutes on the way home. And then all of a sudden, the translator for my equivalent from Japan asked me if I would answer a question for the Japanese elected official that was part of the delegation. And I said, of course I would. And the question was, what do you guys do here in America or in Massachusetts for your roads? And I told him, I said, well, we charge the Massachusetts taxpayer, anyone who owns a motor vehicle, is charged a tax for roads. But that tax never goes to roads. So it's kind of an Abbott and Costello, your tax policy at the state level is an Abbott and Costello routine. And then I asked him, could you ask my colleague from Japan, what does Japan do for roads? And the answer was, well, as soon as we have a problem, there's a problem with the roads, we just go out and fix it. Obviously, a society that is completely upside down, okay? We collect a tax for roads. We do nothing with that tax for decades until it reaches critical mass, and it is probably 10, 25, or 50 times more expensive to deal with it than if we just did it when the problem first arrived. That's our society. I don't get it, and I never will. So having said that, I just want to let you know that Proposition 2.5 is an absolute abomination. I don't know who the architects of that were 40 years ago. It is a complete failure. It fails the taxpayers in this state. It fails our infrastructure. And last but not least, it fails our employees. So I was at 11 Lincoln Street last night because I got into a conversation with individuals outside the building. I was not able to get a room, a seat in the room. Kevin was in the front row. He didn't save me a seat. I don't know why. But having said that, I was able to catch the majority of it from out in the hall. I didn't catch everything, but it seemed to me that our school committee was sympathetic to the plight, especially of the teachers, looking for something that is above and beyond the average for the last quarter of a century, where their COLAs have been in the 1.5 to 2.5 on average over 20 to 30 years. So we have a budget here that for the first time really takes a huge bite out of the unused levy capacity that we have worked, and I have agreed with Lynn and others over the years. It's been our approach to maintain as much as possible, but this year that is taking that down to $2 million. So we're doing everything we can with available funds this year without getting to the point where we would have to go to the ballot for a 2.5 override. So that's my story. Those are my comments. I'll support any motion to move that $301 million forward.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just so it's clear, the $301 million that will be voted tonight will be a future Article 7 as an admin note. The $1 million that's going to go into nuclear and facility stabilization will be in Article 8 in the future. And then the $1.5 million we talked about for roads will be in Article 9 in the future. Because you're going to see it again at a future meeting, so I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, I don't know about the Red Sox, John, but this is
5 years ago, they won the title that year.
all right. That's okay. Thank you, John. How did we get here? We all know in this town that the power plant was going to close and that we were going to lose substantial tax increase. So we all been saving and we all did whatever we could. But the time has come where it's time to do something else. Let this be a light on commercial development. It's very hard to do business in this town. I know I said this before, and you're going to hear it for about 2 more years until it changes. We have a reputation of not welcoming commercial development, and I'm not saying let's take everything that comes in, but we have to do much, much better. We have to make the process better. We have to be respectful. I've seen projects come for this town, and I'll say it, horse racing, okay? That was a portion of a proposal that people were trying to bring to the town. I never endorsed it. I listened. It's my job to listen. It's everybody at this table's job to listen to anybody that wants to open a business in this town. And, you know, it never gets off the ground. So I hope going forward, in the future of the community, that we make some changes. And I know I'm going to concentrate on that, because I'll tell you right now, that $2 million that Kevin was talking about, and John, it's not going to take long to go through. The clock's ticking, and I think we can do a turnaround. Are we going to turn it around that fast? I doubt it. But we need to plan for the future and how we're going to get there, because we can't survive on doing what we're doing. And that wasn't our first budget, I'll be honest. And I'm not going to go into big details, but there was cuts. There was cuts in the police department. There was cuts in the fire department. I know everybody said it's okay until you tell them their local firehouse is closing. And I'll tell you what, you'll see some people in here. And it shouldn't come to that. People pay good taxes. They want service. And this is why we're turning it around from the way we can't do it anymore like we used to. I'm being totally honest. I've been here for quite a while and seen it both sides, and I'm sure you have, from where you sat. And it's, you know, I wasn't going to do it. The world's changed. We're getting bigger. How do you expect to run a community that's exploding? We'll use that word, if you will, because we're not developed, and a lot of people don't understand it, but that's a conversation for another time. Right now, we're trying to keep up with what we have, and you can't do it even upstairs on our floor. We have less people and manpower, if you will, on that floor than we did 15 years ago. Now, you explain that to me, how that works. Or how we have less police officers or less DPW workers. We have the same amount of DPW workers we had in I think it was 85 or 89. And the school teachers have every right to want more money. They have a hard job. Their job is so different right now. I couldn't even fathom that, and that's what I wanted to be, believe it or not, was a math teacher. But things changed in my life and had to go a different route. But that being said, I watched them. I sat on their bargaining committee last time out. I listened to what they said. They wanted time. They wanted, naturally, more money, but they weren't a bad group to deal with. But everybody's panicking. But you can see the numbers there, and I don't want to say they are what they are, but those are true numbers. There's no more. And, you know, I just want to ask a question, because when I was talking with Mr. Campbell last week, the $3.6 million, I know it's a split, but isn't there an $880,000 from last year in salary reserve? Is that included in the 3.6? Because I'm not sure it is.
That 800 is not in the 3.6.
So
that 800 is in salary reserve for FY24.
So that'll go back. Well, can that go back into salary reserve, or will that be added to the 3.6?
No, that's just going to roll forward in the operating budget.
Okay. So we're going to Chapter 70 money, and we're going to split when it comes in. It should be coming in pretty soon.
Yeah, our proposal is that any net new state aid, which we're hoping to hear from the governor next week, we expect to see her budget presentation. Any net new state aid that comes out of that would be a 39-61 split. That's the proportion of the budget right now, and so that's how we're proposing to split that.
69-31.
Right.
61-39.
So we're waiting to hear on that, too. But I am hearing a few different things. I'm hearing that state aid and education, there'll be no cuts. That's what I'm hearing. But I am also hearing that the state, for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, is down $750 million. So there are cuts coming. And as long as it's not in those two areas at the moment, but in tourism, and I know Lee's here, and I feel bad about that, and we always seem to get by, but there again, the less you spend on advertising your tourism, that's what we have in this town, that's only going to hurt us. So that's another minus. So without going into that too much, that's what I'm hearing, and that's why we're where we're at, and we're going to do everything we can to bloat in. It's going to go on to town meeting, and, you know, Can you cut our budget? Yeah, you can cut our budget, but you're not going to have the services you have. And I am trying so heartedly, and I thank this board also for going united, I hope, to town meeting. And, you know, if they decide to cut something, just be prepared that it's going to be a cut. And that's it for me. Any other comments from the board? Mr. Canty?
I misspoke earlier. It is 6139, just to,
That's okay.
well, just to clarify.
But that's okay. And I know you had your hand up, Mr. Lyden, but I want to not keep the meeting going along, but I'm going to let everybody speak on the public comment because there's a lot of people here. And if I do it for you, then I got to do it for everybody. So I wanted to explain that. Okay. So that being said, do I have a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the budget as presented and described.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Bletzer. Discussion?
I have a discussion point, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Helm?
Yeah. I had my hand raised while you all were presenting, so I'll kind of give you my thoughts now, and I'll keep them short. The presentation of Mr. Canty and yourself, Mr. Chairman, I think is very, very accurate. I am concerned, and I am going to be voting no on this because it represents a 6.9% increase in taxes for our residents. Not average, but a 6.9 overall percent increase, which is one thing, which is concerning. But also concerning is I don't feel confident on two levels. One, I don't feel really confident that the school budget actually takes into account the monies needed to come to a satisfactory agreement for our teachers, and that we're going to end up paying more, which only adds more to that burden. Maybe not in this year, but somehow down the road. Also, this budget does push us literally to the brink of a Proposition 2.5% overload. Perhaps not in the next budget cycle, but from what I've been given to understand, projected for the one after that. So we're there. We're on the eve of a Proposition 2.5% override. I'm concerned that that override occurs in an environment where we have just raised people's taxes 6.9% after years of 5 and 5.5%. So because of that, I will be voting no on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Helm?
No.
Mr. Bletzer?
Yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. I'm going to ask we take a 3-minute recess. Welcome back. Next on the agenda is the ACL license agreement. Mr. Brandisi?
Advance the slide, if it's working.
Derek, Mr. Robertson, he's from,
Yeah, I'm going to, as soon as I can get these slides
he's
going, I
on
don't know
there.
why it's not moving. Give me a second here.
okay.
Ginny, can you advance the slides? This remote is not working. Just advance the slide. Just advance the slide over there. Yeah, no, just hit the up button. Yeah, there you go. Because this is not working. There we go. Okay, so I want to introduce Mr. Charles Robinson. He's the president and CEO of the American Cruise Lines. He's joining us via Zoom. I also want to recognize in the room Chief Flynn and our Harbor Master, Chad Hunter, who will be here to provide some additional comments this evening relative to the American Cruise Lines agreement. So Before I get into the meat of the agreement, what I want to do is talk about some of the misinformation, the rumors that are out in the community, so I want to set the record straight. One of the issues that have been bantered about over the last few weeks at caucuses, at Harbor Committee meeting, is that the town manager of the town has not engaged the lobstermen. That is absolutely 100% false. And so I can tell you for 100% certainty that the state delegation, former President, Senate President Terry Murray, select board members in this room, Lee Filson from Plymouth, myself, folks from the Seafood Collaborative, Phil Chandler, who's the chair of the Harbor Committee, the police chief, the harbor master, and others have all collectively over a year and a half had multiple conversations on this agreement. Multiple conversations. I'll talk about some of those. We had meetings with the Harbor Committee October 6th, November 3rd, November 17th. There was a meeting on December 15th in the town hall where we invited members from the Harbor Committee, members from the Lobstermen Association to discuss bringing the American Cruise Lines here. Selectman Mahoney and I met Mr. Danny Holmes down at the T-Wharf on a summer morning at 5:30 a.m. We walked the T-Wharf. There was a meeting, I'll talk more about this one, on May 10th with the American Cruise Lines, the Lobstermen. We all met at the Maritime facility, and we flew in, actually we didn't, Mr. Robinson did, flew in the captain that was going to be piloting this vessel from Detroit to meet with the Lobstermen on May 10th. We also had other meetings, February 27th, March 12th, September 12th at Town Hall, where we had the meeting to talk about the pilot, the 3-day pilot, and review that. Selectman Bletzer sat in that room. So to say that the town has never engaged lobstermen is absolutely false. We have had multiple meetings with folks in this room and others. Again, I'm going to focus a little bit more on this because these are some emails that I've communicated with Mr. Tom O'Reilly, Phil Chandler, former members of the Select Board. You can read it for yourself. This is me sending an email to folks about the proposed agreement, 30-day agreement, asking folks to give feedback. Here's another slide. This is to Tom himself. And I thanked him. Those are the types of questions that are extremely helpful. I would propose prior to our next meeting, the group send me a list of questions that have gone unanswered so I can follow up the American Cruise Lines. I'm asking for information from lobstermen so I can work with the cruise lines. So to say that I have never engaged lobstermen is false. It's a misinformation that's been provided by some folks in this room. Here's another email where we were setting up the meeting with the captain, where I recognized Tom wasn't able to attend that meeting. We talked about that via this email. He wasn't able to attend because there was something happening in his family. So again, to say that we haven't had these conversations is just a rumor. Part of those discussions, to the lobstermen's credit, they advocated that we don't sign a long-term 20-year agreement. Now, I'll be the first one to admit, when the cruise lines first approached us, we were actively negotiating a 20-year agreement. And it was the lobstermen that said, don't do that. We know nothing about these guys. We know nothing about this ship. Please, just do a pilot. So we acquiesced to the lobstermen. We did 3-day pilot visits. The harbor master here answered any questions relative to those visits, what transpired, the good and the bad, places for improvements. So those are the 3 days that we had these folks come in so we could see how this would work. So a couple of things that have been thrown out there I wanted to clarify. When the guests are here, they don't leave town. In fact, they're bused to Plymouth, Pawtuxet. There have been agreements with local restaurants that actually provided food to the guests at the Plymouth, Pawtuxet. These folks visited the Mayflower, they visited the Rock, they visited Pilgrim Hall, and all the other places. They shopped, they did self-guided explorations, and they're going to do that for the 24 visits next year. The projected spending is $175 per day per person. That's all that's happened. So anything else outside of that is just information to try to get folks to think that we're not working with the local industry. That's completely false, because we are. So the agreement. This is a 1-year agreement. It's not a multi-year agreement. It's a 1-year agreement. It's going to have 7 stops from May 11th to June 15th. Those 7 stops, Cruise Lines has agreed to pay $3,000 per stop. And then there'll be another 16 stops from June 18th to October 25th. Those stops will not interfere with the fishing industry, so we agreed to $2,000 per stop during those 16 stops. Any stop where this vessel is tied up for more than 29 hours will cost them $3,000. One of the items that the lobstermen have told us on day one is don't block our winches. We need our 3 winches. The cruise lines proved they would not block the winches on the 3 pilot stops. They wrote into the agreement that they would not block those winches, and I feel confident that they will hold up to that agreement, which is why we will just do this 1 year. We'll see how it works. And if we decide collectively that we should move forward, then we'll move forward beyond calendar year 2024. The cruise lines is fully insured. They have a $1 million per incident and a $5 million aggregate insurance policy. There was recommendations that were made at our most recent Harbor Committee meeting for the American Cruise Lines to recognize the most recent wharf inspection and use that as a baseline for any damages moving forward. They've accepted that as well. The harbor master's here today, who has talked a lot with the select board about a mitigation plan. We recognize that there may be a couple days, maybe 2 days tops during the month of May when the lobstermen are trying to get their gear on the water, that it's going to be a very busy, a very active wharf. And so the harbor master has multiple ideas that I'm going to ask him to come up in a minute to talk about his mitigation plan and what we think we can do to try to make this as seamless as possible. Chad?
Thank you, Derek. Chad Hunter, Plymouth Harbor Master. Upon this, or the proposal that ACL provided, we were asked to look at the feasibility and see if there were any mitigation strategies that we could employ for the month of May into June, understanding that it's a very busy time on the pier as the gear closure is lifted, and the lobstermen and commercial fishermen are trying to return all their gear to the ocean. That date is sort of fluid, so it can change depending on the whales that are in Cape Cod Bay, so we sort of understood that. And we understood the importance of space on the pier, obviously pedestrian safety and access, maintaining that access to the winches, whether the cruise ship is in port or not. So we developed a few things based on the number of meetings that we've had over the last year and a half. I'm probably going to say I've had at least 30 meetings between Townside, Harbor Committee, and Lobstermen meetings. I've been to just about all of them, and it's been numerous. So I've heard a number of comments during those meetings from all different sides and perspectives. Also, when we did the pilot where we had the 3 visits, I kept a very detailed report. Every visit, everything that might have come up or gone wrong, and we were able to, after each visit, sort of fine-tune that plan to make that just a better experience for everybody. So even by that 3rd run, we were doing much better than we were in the first and the second. So based on the proposal or the proposed visits for this upcoming year, we definitely focused on the May 1st to the June 15th, which was a very important time for the fishermen. So some of the strategies that we developed internally here were to, whenever there's a cruise ship in port, to have one of the harbor master staff on the pier to basically assist with whether it's the movement of vehicles and vessels, not having people park on the pier, making sure the pedestrians are sort of sticking to the access routes that we put in and are not impeding any of the commercial uses, whether it's people delivering traps or picking up catch. So basically be there to kind of help assist all parties, make sure that it's done safely and efficiently. One of the things we talked about were sort of limiting deliveries, making sure that there's not a tractor trailer that shows up that needs to make a delivery on the pier, which would completely jam up the flow on the pier. So we did point that out to sort of limit those deliveries to emergency in nature, and if there is an emergency that needs to be fulfilled, that they do it during the off hours to stay out of everybody's way. Develop a pedestrian corridor, which is pretty much the same thing we did for the 3 trial runs for everybody that was down there. We basically used about a 10-foot swath of the pier and blocked off adjacent to the cruise ship just to allow pedestrians to come off the cruise ship or get to the cruise ship safely without getting in the way of any of the commercial operations that were happening on that pier. Another thing that we wanted to try and create is more dockage space along the pier. That was one of the, it was definitely crowded at Town Wharf. So I think during this time, we're able to utilize some of the town moorings to relocate some of the boats that are usually tied to the dock. So that would open up space. Really, the entire east face of Town Wharf, we would try and keep that clear during this time to help assist, whether it's, at certain tides, sometimes you can load gear right off the pier onto a boat, so there's some advantage to that. But even on the queuing end, if somebody needs to tie up to the pier while they await their turn for a winch, or they've just finished, to open up that space, it allows some flexibility there as well. We also looked at the potential of using some of the parking along Town Wharf Way, either between the Rotary and Woods before you go onto the pier, or on the other side between Woods and Lobster Hut, if we thought that was beneficial to, again, whether it's them queuing up to get to the winch, or some space for them to, once they're done, pull off to the side, move their boat, and then get back to their truck. So that's probably a discussion point that we'll have with the lobstermen after this meeting, and see if that's something that we should move forward with and if it's helpful to them. We also looked at the possibility of adding a 4th winch or putting some sort of temporary winch in the location adjacent to the old Harbor Master building. Obviously, these cranes are not cheap. They're an investment of probably $15,000 to $20,000, give or take, to put a permanent winch in place. Or we had contacted one of the crane companies that we use to haul our floats and sort of asked if, how much would it cost to rent a crane. And it's a pretty high price. It's about $200 an hour. So, again, something that could be done, but, those might be cost prohibitive, especially in the sense that after we get beyond June 15th, this area where the winch would be would probably revert back to dockage, so then it would block the winch and make it not usable. So we did do a little, feasibility on that stuff as well. And some of the other ideas that maybe came up were the possibility of storing gear, not on the pier itself, but we looked at the boat ramp lot in that area, in those months, I think we have some capacity over there, and there might be some efficiency for some of the fishermen that have a long drive from the pier. So that would allow them to stage gear ahead of the opening date and then put it closer to the pier for them to access it and be a little more efficient on that side. So, and these are, ideas, and I think this discussion should continue. We should still engage with the commercial fishermen, the harbor committee, and the town to sort of dial this in. Obviously, this is a lot more than 3 stops, and I'm sure, whether it's weather-related or just user-related, there's going to be things that are going to come up that maybe we didn't anticipate. And we'll have to address those and sort of change our game plan as we go. So I look at this as sort of another pilot, just it's the second round. We're going to have, different times of year like I said, different weather events, weekdays versus weekends, lot sort of different than the first 3 visits. So we'll kind of remain nimble on our toes here and address those needs as they come up. So if anybody has any questions, more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chad. So thank you again, Chad, for outlining the mitigation ideas. I just want to here's the schedule so you can see which dates the cruise lines are expected to come here. I wanted to just bring to everyone's attention that bringing cruise ships to the Plymouth Harbor has been in the Harbor Master Plan. This is not anything new. This is something that has been long talked about. In addition to that, I just want to make mention that the state pier is something that we continue to engage the state on, and we are hopeful that over the course of the next couple of years that we will take ownership of the state pier, and that would be the long-term landing spot for this cruise line or any other future cruise lines. So in short, I just want to say that we are hopeful that we can continue to work with all of the fishing industry on the use of this pier. It's not just for one purpose, it's for a multi-purpose use. And so we're hopeful that we can work together on those moving forward. Thank you.
Bring it back to the board. Any questions? Seeing none, wish of the board?
I'll make a motion that we approve the license agreement as presented.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Canty, second by Mr. Helm. Discussion?
And that, just to clarify, that
Sure.
motion included the mitigation efforts that Chad outlined, specifically relating to what ACL would have to commit to in regards to deliveries of fuel, no fuel deliveries, and no trucks being on the pier while they're there during the visits, so that other operations on the pier would not be compromised, such as the fishermen's activities. So if that informs the second, and they still want a second, I would ask for they re-second.
Mr. Helm?
I will re-second.
Re-second. Discussion? Mr. Mahoney?
Yeah, just a couple of comments on the whole process. And this is building off of, I think, Derek's last comment. I think you mentioned that cruise ships were in the Harbor Committee.
The Harbor Plan, that's right.
Harbor Plan, right. So this all began, I'm guessing, a decade ago, and there was a 2-year evaluation of the harbor and the waterfront from top to bottom. And I think it was led in conjunction with our Harbor Committee with, I believe, Chad, UMass Boston? Okay. So the state flagship university did an analysis from top to bottom. They announced the results of that finding in the 2015 to 2016 range, and it was at the Little Theater in PCIS, and I was in the room that night. And they said, among other things, that the single greatest thing that this community could do for economic development in the harbor and the waterfront was to dredge the harbor. And I can tell you right now, I walked out of that room that night saying to myself, this will never happen. And Donald Trump got elected president in November of 16, and 4 to 6 months later, Mr. Brindisi's predecessor, with the former chairman of this board, had a conference call with the Trump White House. And I can tell you something, this goes in with occasionally what Charlie says, you're getting elected to do certain things. So We set the bar high on this one. We just didn't get elected to occupy a space, and apparently look good on television on most Tuesday nights. So the bar was set high. The Trump White House reached out and asked the leaders of this community, what do you need? We need to dredge that harbor. Ed Markey, Massachusetts Democratic U.S. Senator, worked across the aisle with a Republican senator. I don't know which one. And somehow they came up with $14 million. I still can't believe it. And we were told at the time that it would be a $19 million proposition. The balance was $5 million. The Commonwealth came up with $2.5 million, and we went to town meeting, and probably, I'm guessing unanimously, the matching $2.5 million was put in, and we were off and running. So I just want to let you know that there was pretty much unanimous that this initiative would be undertaken and that harbor would be dredged, but there is no one that ever wanted to cannibalize or promote one industry at the expense of another, especially with the history that you gentlemen, and I'm guessing some women, have going back almost a century. That was never the intention. So I just want to make sure that we all know that communication is of the utmost importance. I think we're all available via email and cell phone. And, moving forward, we're expanding from the summer or early fall of 23 from 3 visits. We're going up. This is a 1-year agreement, and we're going to look at every, I expect our harbor master, under the guidance of the police chief, you're going to evaluate every visit coming into the summer of 24. And we're always going to be looking how to improve the process. Because if there are too many problems, I don't think this board will support going into 25 under a similar agreement, if an agreement at all. So those are my comments, but I'll be supporting this motion.
Mr. Blitzer.
Yeah, I really don't want to say much because I've said enough. That this is something that, it's a thing that we wanted to have happen in Plymouth, to get a cruise ship in Plymouth, and we succeeded in getting this done. Yeah, was everybody in favor of it? No. So we sat down with the fishing industry, which I have a lot of respect for. When I was on the PGDC, I had a lot of respect for, and the way we took care of you folks with parking, okay? Believe me, I have a history. I'm not going to debate it tonight. But we have to remember that this harbor is not just for one industry, okay? It's for the whole town. It's for the good of the whole town. So, like I said, I don't want to make a long story because there's people in this room that no matter what I say, they're not going to listen to it. But I want to talk for the people that are at home that might be listening. The problems I heard, the winches. Well, they came in, didn't block the winches. There was still problems. There was still something else. There's a gentleman that's suspended propaganda. I've been to several meetings, and he talks about they're not going to spend any money. There's no economic value for them to come to our port because they don't spend any money in our port. They take buses to Hyannis. They leave town. Absolutely not true, and I said it to him. These are the facts. Continually telling that at least 3 times. He still goes out and says the same thing. He's probably going to say the same thing tonight. But we have ACL here. We have an affidavit from them saying that none of their passengers left Plymouth when they were here, and they're not going to leave Plymouth. So put that to bed, okay? They have a lot of economic value to the town. You can hear from C. Plymouth. We get a gentleman who's got a business that's going to tell you the value of that ship being in our port. It's no different than the tall ships. It brings a ton of tourists and residents that they want to come down and see this. It brings a lot of activity down to our waterfront, which spreads out to our downtown. So there is a lot of value there. Again, it's a 1-year contract. We'll listen to you. We try to stay out of May and June, but they needed that part of the month to run their business. So we're going to accommodate with the chief of police, the town master, to accommodate you folks the best we can, to let you get in and out of the harbor with your gear. We understand that. We understand it. So it's a 1 year. Let's be open-minded. Let's hopefully this works for everybody. Eventually, the goal is to put this cruise ship over on the state pier, because we're working hard to get control of our state pier. Where the Captain John's will be there, the cruise ship will be there, and the Mayflower. They won't go anywhere near your pier or the Tarbes pier. So, we've done everything we can, and I feel good about this. And I believe not all the fishermen are against this. It's just a few. So be open-minded and think about the whole town. You guys are residents. Some of you folks are residents that pay taxes. So we need this increased commercial tax revenue to help with our budget, to help to stabilize our residential taxes. So please be open-minded, okay, for this 1 year agreement. Thank you.
Mr. Canty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to echo what my predecessors in speaking have said, Mr. Mahoney and Mr. Bletzer. I agree with their comments. We will review how this functions, how it actually functions over the year, and then make a decision going forward from there. We recognize that the harbor is for everybody. There are people that work there, people that depend on it. We recognize that they have a special relationship with that harbor, and we are taking steps to coordinate and collaborate with them to make the needs of the entire community in that location work, because the harbor has to work for every member of the community, whether folks are active participants of the harbor or whether they never go down there. Everybody's paying for it. Everyone is reaping a direct or indirect benefit from having that harbor in Plymouth. The prior boards and this board have been interested in having a cruise ship come, not just because it's a cruise ship, not just because it looks nice or it's a big boat and it's impressive, but having a busier harbor makes it easier for Plymouth to compete against other harbors for funding when we need things like dredging in the future, when we need other work done there. And there's also the direct and indirect economic benefits of these individuals coming. The people that are on these cruises, I think last year, they were paying something upwards of $7,000 to be on these cruises. This is similar to when we instituted the transient moorings to bring people that have boats into the harbor to bring some economic dollars down to that area from people that have a higher percentage of disposable income. Because if you can afford to travel along the coast by boat, which, I mean, they say that the best days in a boat owner's life are the day they buy their boat, the day they sell it. So they have some disposable income that they're willing to bring to Plymouth. That can benefit the people in Plymouth, that can benefit those businesses, and that benefits the tax rate and the taxpayers. As you can see with the budget proposal, things are getting tighter in Plymouth. They naturally are, and so we need to leverage the opportunities that we have to make us more competitive with other communities for things like grants, because if we don't, other communities will, and we will lose. And we need to do this for all of the residents of this community. We have been and we will continue to work with the people that depend on the harbor and access to the harbor. We recognize the reasonable requests that are being made down there, and we will abide by the commitments that we've made to make it work for both ACL and those other folks, the fishermen and lobstermen that need access to that harbor during the same time periods. And we are cautiously optimistic that it will work, and it is a work in progress, but we will keep working at it. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Seeing what the hour is and late it is, I'll keep it brief, but a lot of the concerns that were brought up have been addressed, at least to the best of what I've seen. Yeah, is it perfect? You know, we're going to find out, I think. And we're willing to look at it and keep our ear to it. It's like anything else. You got to have a little compromise for the general better of other businesses also. And long as the winches, and I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I've been around a long time, look at a lot of agreements, and this one from day one till now has come a long way. Enough to give it a shot and think of other things. You know, I talked a little about economic development, commercial development. We need to look at our tourism. We need to start doing things a little different. We need to have, if you will, Plymouth dollars. So when these people come in, we give them a few Plymouth dollars and off they go and they spend them. Why do we do that? So we can track it. Then we can tell you exactly where the money's being spent, where it is. And, you know, give it a shot. It's a one-year thing. It's a trial. If it doesn't work, you heard the members on the board say that we wouldn't support it. So let's see what the board does. But we really vented this and looked at everything. So let's see what happens. Mr. Helm?
Are you asking for a vote?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Blitzer?
I vote yes.
Mr. Canty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Spring special town meeting article discussion?
So again, Mr. Chairman, this is a weekly agenda item. We'll keep it on the agenda until the warrant closes on February 2nd. If any board members, gives you the opportunity to talk about any articles you want to propose for the special town meeting.
Seeing no hand up. Anyone wishing to speak under public comment?
Go ahead, get up, Mark.
3 minutes, we have a few people here.
Steve Lyden, Precinct 17. I had a question about the governor's announcement of a $1 billion shortfall in the budget. I talked to Mr. Brandisi, and he said he's going to address that later this evening. As far as the cruise ships go, I have to go. I'm chairman of the Visitor Service Board. Our board supports tourism. I'm also a liaison to the Downtown Businessmen Association, and we need the business. We're here for tourism. That's our biggest industry. Yes, so is the fishing industry, and we need to support both. But if you look at the downtown, you're seeing more shops that are empty. We need this tourism as much as we can get. So I support this, and I thank you very much for your vote tonight. And thank you for the budget for the town. I'm on fixed income. I don't like my taxes going up, but I remember the days we had closed fire stations. We can't have that anymore. We've been shortchanging things for a long time. Now it's time, to pay up, and that's what we have to do, whether you like it or not. The budget's, it is what it is, So I thank you guys for doing a great job on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Zappetto. I own a business on the waterfront. I've been waiting for this for 5 years. Honestly, this was in my original business plan that there was going to be cruise ships coming into the area. I think it's really good for the area. The folks that come on the tour buses don't always spend so much money. The people on the cruise ships, this is who we really need. Now, personally, I don't think I made a whole lot of money when that last cruise ship was here, but that doesn't matter because it's good for the waterfront, it's good for the town, it's good for everybody. There's clearly no reason why we can't share the waterfront and the dock. I feel like you guys have done everything you can to bend over backwards to accommodate the people that were upset with it, and so I see no reason why we shouldn't move forward with it, and I support this.
Hello, Kurt Holmes, commercial lobsterman on Plymouth. I'd just like to read a letter in behalf of the Plymouth Lobstermen's Association. I'm speaking in behalf of the Plymouth Lobstermen's Association and the 85 Plymouth fishing families who make up our organization. Per your own harbor plan, we have brought millions of dollars of revenue to Plymouth. From the beginning, we have been clear that we are not opposed to cruise ships coming to Plymouth. We simply want to ensure that it's done in a way that leaves room for the lobstermen who have fished these waters for centuries and who have a contract with Plymouth to use these docks for their vessels. Because of our long-standing relationship with Plymouth, we have attempted to work with you to bring the best outcome for everyone. In December of 2022, we were forced to have our legal counsel send a letter explaining that the proposed cruise ship contract violated Plymouth's charter, bylaws, comprehensive plan, and harbor plan, as well as our contract. This was done in an attempt to simply open dialogue with you so we could be part of the discussion. I'm submitting that letter into record. At first, this worked. We reached an agreement that the cruise ships would not dock from May 1st to June 15th. This was because this is the beginning of our lobster season, when the waters are finally opened up by the government and we are able to fish. If we're not able to fish at that time, we will be further financially impacted. Part of being able to fish at that time is being able to access the dock openly and without interference, as we have done for years now. Despite this agreement, Plymouth has now backtracked on its word. While we have not been shown the final lease agreement with the cruise line, we have been told the cruise ship will in fact be able to dock during this time. This has forced us again to have our lawyer send a letter in January of this year explaining why the lease agreement would violate the law. In submitting that letter, I'm submitting that letter into record as well. For this, we have now been threatened to have our license for the winch revoked or not renewed. This is unacceptable. I'm here to ask that you honor your agreement to not have the cruise ship dock from May 1st to June 15th. If you don't, you will be compounding hardships for the lobster industry here. Putting our 85 fishing families first is a priority. We will take legal action if we have to, but we hope you will table this vote for today and continue to work with us. In black and white, all we want is open winches and May 1st to June 15th. That's really all we're looking for. Thank you.
Are you the new president of the, okay, congratulations.
Hi, I'm Robert Ward. I've been a fisherman for over 50 years. I fished out of Plymouth Harbor since 1995. I'm the delegate for the Plymouth area for the Massachusetts Lobstermen's Association. I'm also on the executive board of the Massachusetts Lobstermen's Association. I'm the treasurer of their foundation, and I've been very involved in fishing all my life. And I have a letter to read that was issued from the Mass Lobstermen's Association, and it's in concern to the cruise ship. Dear Mr. Quintal, the Massachusetts Lobstermen's Association respectfully submits a letter of enormous concern regarding the cruise ships being allowed to tie up at the T-Wharf in Plymouth during the month of May. The commercial lobster fleet in Plymouth cannot endure any disruptions to the start of the limited season. The commercial lobster fishing fleet of Plymouth has 3 months winter closure for the protection of the right whales, which ends on May 15th, depending on whether the whales leave or not. The fishermen need the dock space and the wharf during this time to get the traps in the water as soon as possible to catch up after the closure. Any further reduction in the time or access to the commercial fishing pier, especially in May, is unacceptable. Established in 1963, the MLA is a member-driven organization that accepts and supports the independence of species conservation and members' collective economic interests. The membership is comprised of fishermen from North Carolina to Canada and encompasses a wide variety of gear types, from fixed gear and mobile gear alike. The MLA continues to work conscientiously through the management process with the Mass Division of Marine Fisheries, the Mass Energy and Environment Affairs, Atlantic States Marine Fisheries, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and the National Oceanography Atmosphere Administration to ensure the continued and sustainable profitability of the resources which the fishermen are engaged. Per the MADFM, the 2022 lobster tables, the commercial lobster fleet in Plymouth is currently home to 53 commercial lobstermen that landed 806,771 pounds of lobster in 2022. The economic value of this commercial lobster fleet in Plymouth is over $4.3 million. So when you think about what you're talking about, what the cruise ships bringing in, don't forget what we bring in. While generating also hundreds of jobs in the community. These are the real dollars being earned and spent in the local economy. With the proposed increase in the number of days a cruise ship will tied up in Plymouth will greatly reduce these dollars. How many individuals, businesses can really afford to lose money with already tightened margins is not many. Furthermore, the cruise ship will come and go without creating any jobs within the tourist area, boarding of a fleet of, it says buses and things, but you talked about that, maybe that's not true. The MLA cannot support any more unnecessary economic harm to the existing and historical community of lobstering industry for the financial gain of others. The Massachusetts Lobstermen Association.
Excuse me, sir.
The work.
Over here.
Supports the efforts of Plymouth Harbor, Mass.
Sir, how much more time do you need? I'm over here. How much more time? do you need?
Just a minute or two.
Okay, good.
Okay,
All right.
I'm done with the letter. My personal comments are, this economic age, I'm also an accountant. I've worked in Plymouth and I have, many clients and work there. You people talked about limited people and having work troubles and not having enough people. I do not know one of my businesses that isn't going through the same industry problems. The fishing industry is the same way. The commercial fishing in the last couple of years has declined due to economic conditions, due to not being able to have work, due to the prices in lobsters. All these things have tied in, and any more hurt, and you're going to really affect these guys. They really work hard. It's something that they have no other income. They have nothing else they can do. And losing that month, after 3 months of not being able to work, and actually it works even longer than that because they got to bring the gear out before February, so they have to lose time on the other end when they could have fished. And now they're putting gear in at the last minute when they would have been in a month or two earlier. It's really economically could hurt them. There's legislations to try to compensate them for that, but the government has done nothing to help at this point in time. And to be hurt some more, it's not a good thing. So hopefully you guys will, follow what you've done. I understand there's been changes. We've had a fight to get our parking. You talked about that. We had to do a lot of fighting to keep that, and it's not been easy for us. We've been having to be, to fight you to do this, and that's not what we should be having to do. We should be all working together to keep the harbor the way it is and to keep the industry the way it is. So thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Paul Quintal. I'm a resident of Precinct 10 and a Plymouth Harbor Committee member for the past 25 years. My comments tonight do not represent the Plymouth Harbor Committee nor any other group, but are my own opinions. My statement tonight will focus on the American Cruise Line and the Plymouth commercial fishermen and women shared use of the Plymouth Town Wharf. Specifically, it's more about the process and the timeline that has brought everyone to this point. During the first half of 2022, Plymouth Town officials started serious conversations with American Cruise Line regarding the potential dockage of large cruise ships tying to the Plymouth Town Wharf. A draft contract was released in early fall of 2022. That was the first knowledge to the Plymouth commercial fishermen, the Plymouth Harbor Committee, and the public that a ship was potentially coming. By request of the Plymouth commercial fishermen, a number of meetings were held, bringing together interested parties and Plymouth town officials concerning impacts to all users. Many of these meetings taking place during the first half of 2023. With dialogue and communication in town officials, it was verbally agreed upon allowing fishermen to share use of both ACL and the Plymouth commercial fishermen. In June of 2023, American Cruise Lines designed a pier extension to support the 70-foot overhang of their ships. The cost of this project was $660,000 to be funded by Plymouth taxpayers. Local commercial fishermen and the Plymouth Harbor Committee both volunteered a no vote. And on October 21st, the town meeting members voted no to funding this project. It was after this vote the town of Plymouth recanted their verbal agreement for blackout dates and they had provided to the Plymouth commercial fishermen, and further communication was pulled off the table. Moving forward, now I'm speaking for the group that's been in the audience. Plymouth commercial fishermen do not want to fight. Plymouth commercial fishermen welcome American Cruise Lines to visit Plymouth. Plymouth commercial fishermen are not the enemy. They are respectively taking a position to defend and protect their livelihoods. My goal tonight is to have everyone involved to take a big breath and reset. There are still options available to share the Plymouth Town Wharf for a solution that will work for all parties. Please give compromise a chance. Thank you.
Hi, Tom O'Reilly, commercial fisherman. I wasn't even going to talk tonight, but when Derek put up some emails up on the board there, I have a few I'd like to read. He's correct. Right from the start, we talked. We get together, we talked. It was good. Everyone was agreeing upon things. The only thing we asked for was May to June 15th. That's all we asked for. Like Paul said, we're not against it coming in. And we even at meeting said, hey, it worked out pretty good when they came in on Sunday and it turned around. I said it at Harbor Committee meetings, and I've said it to you. But I'm going to, just to defend myself, I'm going to read an email. Hi, Derek. We're having a commercial fish meeting next week. Has there been any updates with ACL? Also, when you get close to the agreement with them, are you still going to bring Danny and myself in, as stated in your earlier emails? Thanks, Tom. His response. Okay. Give me a second here. Oh, thanks. After our meeting past June with you, Paul, and ACL, Chad, etc., I was under the impression that we were all collectively going to work together, which we were, and we're doing, to ensure the pier will be used to protect the interests of the fishing industry, while allowing the pier to be used for other purposes, protecting the families of the fishing industry. Has always been our main concern when discussing the potential agreement with ACL. As you may recall, Paul and others did a tour of the harbor with ACL and with the captain, as well as walked the pier, discussed the safety issues, and a way to tie the vessel. Everyone shook hands, as we did, in support of the 3 pilot visits in August. For whatever reason, you and others chose to undermine the ACL first visit with what you did with the lobster bait. I want to address that. Right from the start, right at the very first meeting, you said you weren't going to interrupt our fishing. That bait that was put down there, if you looked under both winches, that bait was piled, had covers on it, a tarp over it, and tied. The bait guy comes on Fridays. If you want to fish the weekend, you have to get your bait on Friday to fish Saturday and Sunday. You were told that right from the start. So that puts that one to bed. And for whatever what you did with the lobster bait, inappropriate behavior to Rick Veo, which I finally found out who it was. He parked under the only available winch, and I asked him to move. And he said, Chad told me I could park here. I said, Chad did not tell you. you could park under the only available winch. And myself, the only thing I said to you was you need to get people off that dock. There was no security down there, zero. The dock was covered with people. And if anyone knows, or has anyone ever seen a spring line snap, it can cut a person in half. All we were doing is asking you guys to get people into safety. I will give Charlie Blester credit, because I talked to Charlie, and Charlie understood what I was saying, and he got people back off the dock. And I did run down the dock and yell at somebody because they were standing on the cleat with the spring
Mr.
line
O'Reilly,
on
how
it.
much more time do you need?
2 seconds. I'm not going to discuss. You then took it upon yourself at town meeting to undermine the pier extension. I did not. That pier extension was voted down by the Harbor Committee, and the complete commercial fishing thing, we had 35 people there. It was a unanimous decision, because that's not the dock the town needs. That's why we went. I'm the spokesperson for the commercial fishermen. I'm on the Harbor Committee, which makes me the spokesperson for you. And I always thought town meeting was a forum for you to go up and express what you think about something coming up. And that's what we did. It gets voted down by two entities that are down the harbor all the time. And then he goes on to say, congratulations, you succeeded. Given this lack of cooperation and purposeful deception on your part, I will decline your offer to meet. Let's be clear, you are not interested in collaborating. Yes, we are. That's why we got an attorney involved to bring this back to the table. And the last thing I want to say is, all we wanted was May to June 15th. I have been out of work since my boat came out December 22nd. Because if you don't get it out by February 1st, you lose everything. Federal fines, everything. And if my one trawl that's left out there gets tied up in a right whale, guess what? It affects every single person in this room, and they shut it down for good. So we're actually missing 5 to 6 months, not 3 months. And we need that dock to tie up to. If you go down there, there's boats in a line waiting. One boat ties up, moves to the back, ties their gear. The next one comes. You tie to the dock. Go get your trailer. We need to work. We can't have a boat come in there and block the dock. Are they going to let us tie up alongside them when they're in there? Like we can to the draggers that are there? No. So that's all I have to say. And we have been open to discussion the whole time. You just haven't listened to us, because that is all we asked for. That is it. That's all we asked for. Thank
Okay.
you.
That's it. Oh, I see somebody on the line. Mr. Vale, would you like to say something?
I would. I think everyone here, and certainly including myself, has, the utmost respect for the fishing industry, the aquaculture industry in Plymouth. It's been around for obviously hundreds of years, and I think we all hope it continues. But I think we have to face the reality that Plymouth as a community cannot simply rely on its harbor to just be a fishing and aquaculture community. We absolutely need tourism. And, Mr. Holmes' statements about the fishing families and just how he articulated himself about that, I mean, we all hear that. But on the same side, there's a lot of business owners, there's a lot of restaurant owners, there's a lot of landlords in town that need those tourism dollars, and we have to find ways to share the harbor. The cruise line, I've had multiple discussions or emails with them. Completely stand-up organization, worked extremely well. We met the ship down there, tried to greet them, give them a warm welcome, gifts from the stores in town and coupons and whatnot. We did have a continual stream of people, all 3 visits coming into the store and going into restaurants. I've talked to many business owners in town, many restaurant owners in town that experienced the same thing. We did not see any of them leaving town. As Mr. Brindisi said, they were going to Plymouth, Pentuxet. They were doing self-exploration in the downtown, and I think it was a boom. I mean, the bottom line is, for Plymouth to succeed, in the next 100 years, it has to become a primary destination. People use the 3 Ps, the Portsmouth and Portland and Plymouth, and we need to do a better job becoming those communities. Obviously, we have to respect and embrace and support the fishing and aquaculture community, but we have to find ways of becoming that diverse community that can attract tourism across the board. I mean, I said to, 1 million people, we need to be a town that when someone anywhere on the South Shore says, let's go out tonight, it's not a matter of where we're going to go, it's where we're going to go in Plymouth. And the more we can make that happen, it's better for everyone. And let's face it, we're a seaside community. The more people we have coming in, the more seafood we're going to be selling in town. And I would think that directly impacts the local fishermen. I would certainly hope that there's an initiative in town between the restaurants and the commercial fishermen that we're trying to keep as much of the catch as we can here. The more restaurants we open, the more tourists we get here, the more regional tourism we promote, the better off we're all going to be. I think it does sound to me like, from Mr. Holmes and others that, people do want to see this work out. There may be a gap here that just can't be bridged. I mean, you have to look at ACL's requirements. They may not be able to simply offer tours to Plymouth in a certain amount of time. It may have to, be in May, and if it does, then we have to find a way to make that work. But I don't think we can turn these cruise ships away. I think it's part of Plymouth's future, and I think we have to make it happen.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on the public comment? Okay. All right. Seeing nobody else, we'll go back to Town Manager's report. Mr. Brindisi.
Okay, so I'll make it brief. It's getting late. The first thing I did want to bring up, and Mr. Leiden had mentioned it, we were notified over the weekend that the governor is going through 9C cuts. So it's basically, in layman's terms, mid-year cuts. Apparently, the revenues that were projected by the governor's office are falling short by approximately $1 billion. So how is that going to affect the town of Plymouth? As of today, we've been told that our earmarks will be cut in half. So right now, that is the $70,000 earmark that we received through Senator Stu Moran's office for the master planning process, so that'll be reduced in half. And then we had a smaller earmark that we were tracking that came to the Center of Active Living to create a handicapped accessible desk. So that was through the state rep's office as well, and so that'll be cut in half as well. So we are looking forward to the governor's budget, FY25 budget of which we expect to be presented next week. We're hoping that these 9C cuts will not have a trickle-down effect to the FY25 budget, but certainly keep the board posted on that. In addition, I just wanted to just make a couple small announcements. So the cabins at Hedges Pond are planned to be demolished in sometime March, with the bids are back, and so we're hoping that those 4 cabins get removed by mid-March in preparation for the summer months. The last day of early voting is tomorrow for the special election for the NIPS ban. So that'll be from 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. here at Town Hall. And then the actual voting day is this coming Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention, I had mentioned it last week, about the AC pipe that was found buried over at Stevens Field. That has been successfully removed, so that project now continues to move forward. And then just so folks are aware, we are expecting a major storm tonight. We are expecting power outages. We had a team meeting this morning with the fire chief, police chief, and other public safety officials who are already preparing for the storm. We know the Parks Department and that crew is already on standby to help remove trees that are down to get power restored as quickly as possible. So we'll keep the board apprised of any challenges we face over the course of the next 12 hours. Thank you.
Excuse me. Any questions or comments for Derek? Thank you, Derek. Anyone have anything under new business? Letters? Old business? Motion to adjourn.
I would make a motion to adjourn, having concluded our business.
Second by Mr. Bletzer. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Have a good week. We'll be on TV next Tuesday.